Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Neutral Lounge, a podcast about video games and computer technology. I'm your host Joel, and with me is my co-host Alex. Together we make up the Neutral Lounge. In this episode, we talk about E3 2021. Was it a null event? Portable gaming devices and the state of the market. Remasters, reboots and remakes. We pay homage to the Amiga, a classic 16-bit gaming computer, and we talk Windows 11. Hi everyone, just before we begin, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Feedspot, who have listed Neutral Lounge in the top 10 computer hardware podcasts you must follow in 2021. I'll provide a link to their website in the description. Hey Al.
Hey,
Well,
Joe.
welcome back to the Neutral Lounge. So how you been?
Yeah, not too bad. Things have been busy at work. We've got this strange bout of warm weather at the moment in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
roasting in London, that's for sure.
there's quite a lot of interesting things happening, I think. It's been a while since we've been doing the podcast, and I guess it'll be a while before we actually get this out. But I guess just catching up with friends and taking advantage of a bit of the easing of lockdown pre so-called Freedom Day. So yeah.
Yeah, and before obviously the third wave that people are warning us will come, into place
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
But things are definitely improving. I mean, I've been able to see friends and family a bit more often,
Yeah.
going out for drinks and enjoying the weather within reason. Still taking some precautions and being sensible. But yeah, I mean, can't complain. It does feel like things are getting better.
Have you had both jabs? Both vaccines? Mine's due next week. That'll be my second one.
Yeah, I've had both jabs.
Mhm.
The first jab, no issue. Second jab, knocked me for six for a couple of days.
Mhm.
But I'm just glad that's done. My partner, she's had her jabs. Family
Yeah.
have done theirs, so it's important. Gives you a level of protection.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever 100%, but in my own view, better with than without. Some people obviously prefer not to,
Yeah.
and their choice.
Yeah. It's the only reason why we've been able to relax as well. At least easing of the conditions of where we are, because otherwise, the infection numbers and hospitalization numbers would be in sync. But I think thankfully that it's managed to break at least some of that connectivity around it.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, look, it's just brilliant to get the weather
Mm.
at the right time. Roughly at the same time as the easing of the restrictions, and just have something that resembles summer.
Yeah.
Because we haven't had much of that here, right? That's for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Enough talk about the pandemic. What I want to bring up right now is really something that I mentioned last podcast. I thought we should kind of do some corrections and omissions.
Mhm.
And obviously, this is not really a write-in. It's me kind of making observation on the previous podcast and just kind of seeing things I might have said that weren't entirely accurate, that I think need a bit of correcting, or things that I shouldn't have left out that I did.
Mhm.
For anybody who might be listening to this, I just feel it's worth putting it in there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like I said to you before, we've also got to eat our own dog food.
Yeah.
It's important, you know what I mean? So look, I mean, I'll go through my items, but
Mhm.
last podcast we talked about AMD FSR.
Mm.
And I mentioned that it might have 5 to 6 modes of operation.
Mhm.
Totally inaccurate. It's 4 modes.
Well, you're close enough.
Yeah, close enough, but I had to put it out there because it started bothering me after a while. I also said something that definitely worthy of a slap on the wrist,
Mhm.
and it was that the 3070 Ti or Ti, whatever your preference is, would be close to a 3080 in some benchmarks.
Mm.
Yeah. In reality, what we got was a graphics card that was 5 to 10% better than a 3070,
Yeah.
but roughly with 20% more cost. So that, that was not quite a prediction, but I mean, it was certainly a terrible bit of information. And the other thing is, like, we also talked about Risk,
Hmm.
but we really omitted Risk 5,
Hmm. Hmm.
from the conversation, which is open standard, an open standard for instruction set architecture,
Hmm. Hmm.
specifically for RISC CPUs. It doesn't quite make the chips you produce from that standard open,
Hmm.
but the standard itself is open. Quite a big omission, and when you consider that Intel may buy Sci5, who produce RISC-V CPUs
Hmm.
or RISC-V designs, and then the last thing that really did bother me at the time was I kept on saying Game Pass on PlayStation Store. Yeah,
Did you?
I said it. Yeah, I did. I said it multiple times. Yeah. Game Pass on PlayStation Store. No, what I meant was Game Pass on PlayStation.
Hmm.
If it ever makes its way onto PlayStation, it's definitely going to be a separate app or separate entity.
Mm.
I can't imagine the two things intermingling, if you like. So, I had to get it out there because it was, it was starting to bother me.
Yep. Well, fair play.
So that was my stab at it anyway. So I think the first topic that we really want to talk about really is E3 2021.
Mm.
Was E3 2021 a null event or a non-event,
Mm.
depending on how you want to put it? Now I kind of want to focus on the three big players or the three big platform owners: Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony. We'll do the usual things. Al, we'll have to grade these guys because everybody else probably has, and we might as well. I think there's just some interesting conversations to be had here, just talking about how everybody did, how these three entities did,
Yeah.
but also talking about the way things were done at the moment. Yeah, is E3 really viable going forward?
Mm.
If this is the future of E3, does it even make sense to have an E3?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the question I really want to pose. And I've been to E3 a couple of times, so I've got some on the ground experience with it. Is there actually a place for an event like this going forward? Yeah, that would be an interesting part of the conversation.
Mm.
So let's just get into this.
Yeah.
So in terms of
Yeah.
E3, we obviously had Microsoft, who did a joint event with Bethesda. We had Nintendo, who did a specific Nintendo Direct stream
Yep.
for E3, and we had Sony, who really didn't turn up. Yeah, and to be honest, what I've heard is Sony are not even going to turn up at
Mm.
Gamescom. So let's get it out there. Last place. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No effort, no reward. That's the reality of it, right? Now, looking at the
Yeah.
presentation, Microsoft presentation, get straight out there. Many or some, I would say more like some of the big games aren't going to be available until 2022. And the rate at which games mention 2022,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? 2022 is going to be a big year for Microsoft and Xbox, yeah, and Game Pass. What I would say about the presentation, not enough gameplay, not enough real gameplay. And to break it down a little bit,
Mm. Yeah.
what I saw was 19 games for 2021, some of which have already been released, like Yakuza Like a Dragon, Dark Alliance. Some notable things coming out in July: The Ascent, which looks like some sort of action RPG, kind of shooter, but looks kind of quite compelling. And there's also Microsoft Flight
Hmm.
Simulator, and it looked like with a Top Gun Maverick expansion. Maverick being, Tom Cruise's character's call sign. And that could be quite a landmark
Mm.
release for the Xbox as well, because we all know how hard Flight Simulator pushes even high-end PCs. And if they can get that running on an Xbox Series X, even a Series
Yeah.
S, that would be quite a remarkable accomplishment. What is a system seller is another question, because a flight simulator is a flight simulator.
Yeah. only certain people will be playing it
Exactly,
or
exactly.
looking to play it.
It would be a really great technical showcase. That's how I looked at it. You know, they've got also Hades coming out in August, but that's across all the platforms. 12 minutes looked quite interesting, and that has some well-known actors and actresses in it. I think, is it Daisy Ridley or Riley, the actress from
Yeah,
Star Wars?
yeah.
I think she's actually in this game or voicing it. Psychonauts 2 comes out in August. That looked good. But then we get to what I'd call are two really show-stopping games, you know, for the Xbox. First one, and this is really one for you, Al, is Forza Horizon 5.
Yeah.
You know, comes out in November. I mean, this thing is cross-generation. However, it looks stunning.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it looks stunning, and I think it was the Xbox they showed it on, but it absolutely looks stunning. The level of detail, you know, everything looked super, super smooth.
Yeah.
They also talked about the location being in Mexico, in that they've really collaborated with certain artists,
Yeah.
out in that country, just to produce in-game objects, items that sit in the kind of game world they've built. It was just genuinely really, really impressive. You know, it's again the same sort of thing that we said about Horizon.
Yeah. Yeah.
It may be cross-gen, but it's super, super, super impressive.
Yeah.
I'm sure Microsoft, you know, got no backlash from saying it was cross-generation, but you know, they always said they would be doing kind of cross-generation. So that, you know, that was, you know, to me that looked like a reason to have, you know, an Xbox Series X or S.
Although, well, maybe that's the second topic when we talk about gaming portables. But you know, with yeah, I think there's an alternative that's coming. That should be coming. But you know, we'll touch upon that a bit later. But I think it is a, you know, if you want a good top level racing sim or racing kind of experience, I think that's the game to kind of go for. And you know, God knows when Gran Turismo is going to be out from the PlayStation kind of side of things. So
yeah, correct. But I mean, the graphics themselves looked amazing. I mean, I think there was a couple of scenes where they would just showcase the level of detail in the geometry of a particular scene, and you kind of assumed it was just there to kind of demonstrate, just, you know, in a fairly static, you know, way, the level of detail they could have in a scene. And then they had the cars just kind of come into view, and you kick into gameplay more or less straight away. And that for me was wow. You know, you know what I mean. I didn't expect that, but
yeah.
now beyond Forza Horizon 5, the next show-stopping item was obviously Halo. Yeah, Halo Infinite makes a return, and now it looks as if it's been split into two parts. The multiplayer part, which I believe we got more gameplay footage of, is free.
Yeah.
Free to play, or, you know, free. Now I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means it's like for lots of free to play model, or it's just free. Don't know. I think they just said it's free. Yeah.
It's going to be a Fortnite. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah. I hope not. But I gotta admit, it did look very interesting. I gotta admit, it did look very interesting. Whether I'll, you know, play it, not sure yet. Not sure.
Yeah.
You know, but Halo multiplayer back in the day was super stellar.
Yeah.
You know, I spent a lot of time with it. And as for the campaign, they didn't really show any real gameplay footage.
Yeah.
They did show a sweeping pan of the landscape. You know, they panned across it, they kind of went into it. You know, I guess they're just trying to demonstrate an improvement in some of the graphics fidelity.
Yeah.
Which I think they achieved, if I'm being honest. But it was just a little bit disappointing. They didn't have any, you know, real gameplay. Yeah. So I'm less excited about that side of things.
Yeah.
Less excited. And I don't believe they have an actual release date.
No. Yeah.
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 I mean, there are a few other things to look forward to in 2021. As far as I can make out, Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5, those are the big hitters for the tail end of this year. Yeah, those are the big hitters.
Yeah.
Now, looking at 2022, 2022 looks to be an interesting year for Microsoft and Xbox. So they demoed Stalker 2, which is, and Stalker's really a PC game.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has a kind of very kind of Metro-esque vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember about the first Stalker. Now that really did look impressive as well. Looked like a high-end PC game, if I'm being honest. But the demo itself, I'm not sure it was running on an Xbox. It may have been just a PC. But nevertheless, looked really, really impressive.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, really, really impressive. So that looks like something that, I don't know about System Seller. It's good to know that it's there. If the Xbox is able to run it like I saw it, that's going to be an impressive game that people are going to want. And honestly, they showed off Starfield.
Yeah.
And I'm pushing out the definition of showed because really, all we really got was further confirmation that the thing exists, another confirmation that it's only going to be on Xbox and PC, and really, it was just a rendered scene. At most, that will give you an understanding on the kind of look and feel, the art direction potentially, and that was really it.
Yeah.
Nothing more. Nothing else that you could get really more excited about. Other
Yeah,
than,
not pre-order level yet.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure some people are looking at that already. I don't know what you could pre-order, based on what.
Yeah.
They also had the Outer Worlds 2, but again, that had no real gameplay footage at all. The development studio kind of tongue-in-cheek acknowledged that during the video they showed. But that's coming in 2022. There's Replaced, which I really like the look of. So it's another of these quote-unquote indie type games with pixel art. Had really good-looking lighting. That did have gameplay. And all I can say about that it looks cool, and it looks also super violent. One of the opening moments of the demo, they had an arm break and then a headshot. That's how it looked to me anyway.
Yeah.
We also had Redfall. Now Redfall's from Arcane Studios, so the people who were doing Deathloop. This had a really good look and feel. It seems to be some sort of vampire hunter, first or third person shooter. So that's definitely one to look out for, if you ask me. And Arcane have got a really good track record. They're really one of, I think, one of the crown jewels of this whole acquisition that Microsoft made, really, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're the guys who did Dishonored. And then there were a couple of things I really wanted to mention. First thing was this thing called, was it Somerville? Which looks to be a game about a family. It just reminded me of Flashback. Yeah, if you remember that old 2D game with cinematic moments and lifelike animation, and I'm sure there's a lot of games like that, but that's the vibe I got off it. And then there was also Party Animals, which looked like just a very cute beat 'em up with stuffed toys. There was just something about it. It probably will play extremely simple, won't have any legs on it, but it's something to basically kind of comment on. Especially when you can compare it to everything else that was kind of like high-end sci-fi, violent, whatnot. It was just something different.
Yeah.
So in my view, I mean, I did watch Microsoft's presser a couple of times. They definitely had a really good showing. Yeah, it's just a shame we didn't see more Halo. It's a shame that we didn't see more Starfield.
Yeah.
What they really lacked in their presser is the mic drop moment, or the just one more thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Redfall was meant to be their just one more thing, but it really kind of, okay. So we've got a rendered scene. We know it's coming out. It wasn't really that exciting, if I'm being honest. It was interesting that they had it, but it wasn't really that exciting. So that's what I got from the Microsoft one. Now Nintendo, they obviously did a direct stream.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know how I feel about this. I think in many ways it's what you would expect from them. Yeah.
Well, they've been doing directs for on their own for quite some time, right? So it's kind of standard fare for them, really.
Yeah. Correct. I mean, they spoke about Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity DLC, which is coming in June with a second expansion coming in November. Mario Golf Super Rush coming in late June.
Yeah.
Which again, Mario Golf, stellar game. I'm sure people are gonna want to pick it up. They spent a lot of time with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but really it's because they're introducing a Tekken character to it, Kazula.
Yeah.
And they had quite a clever take on the whole Tekken cutscene. That famous cutscene where I think it's Kazula himself gets dropped into that volcano.
Yeah.
He was actually doing it for a lot of the Smash Brothers characters or protagonists. It is one after the other. So that was quite cool. They've got a Monster Hunter game, Skyward Sword HD coming out in July.
Yeah.
Which is just really a HD remaster. It's a remake. Not just understand it. They did one really, I thought, interesting thing that I feel only Nintendo would do. Basically had a Legend of Zelda Game & Watch. Game & Watch that's coming out November 12th. Obviously brought a massive smile to my face. Because, in terms of handheld and portable gaming devices, the first of its kind. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And now they also showed two fairly noteworthy things, beyond the Game & Watch. Metroid Dread, which I believe is the first 2D Metro game for I think 19 years, which I found quite staggering really, that it's been 19 years. And they also showed off Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. I hope I got that right.
Yeah.
Which I thought looked quite impressive, as much as you can do impressive on something like a Switch. Certainly the art direction, the look of the thing was really nice. No doubt about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's enough to get the fans going again, saying they just want more of the same, really. So I think having a 2 announced and a plan for it, I think is great.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. I mean, Nintendo fans, in my humble opinion, buy the consoles to play Nintendo games. And that's the reality of it. I mean, even more so than PlayStation fans.
Yeah.
So all in all, I thought a fairly excellent showing for Nintendo with a lot of games.
And the only thing missing, and we'll touch upon it on the next bit, is the the Switch Pro.
Yeah, the Switch Pro.
Everyone was kind of like, where is it?
I think that's a true comedy moment there, right? Because you're doing a Nintendo Direct for E3, but you don't announce your new hardware, and you leave it until post E3 to announce the OLED Switch, which is basically a revision and iteration of what you already have. I just found the whole thing quite strange. I'm not so surprised they haven't got the a Switch 2 as it were, or Switch Pro, but I'm just surprised at the delivery or the thing.
They may do. It's just interesting timing, and obviously we'll touch upon it with on the next topic as well. But like it is quite comical. But maybe they still have it in the up in their sleeve somewhere.
Yeah, but it's just like, even if you're only doing the OLED version of your console, why wouldn't you basically do it within the stream and as your just one more thing moment? Why would you leave it to a separate kind of quite subdued announcement, if you ask me? I mean, what was it? Maybe they posted a video and put a page up on their website.
Yeah, there wasn't much around it, so
yeah, I found it quite surprising. And I have actually forgotten a couple of interesting things that did come out Nintendo's stream. First thing is they're doing a reboot or remake of Advance Wars. That well-known turn-based game that I think was it's a DS game, wasn't it? If I remember that right.
No, I think it came from Game Boy Advance. I think it was
Game Boy Advance.
especially with a name like Advance Wars.
Yeah, true, actually. True.
I think it started there, but it was extremely popular on a DS.
And then they've also got Mario plus Rabbids,
Mm-hmm.
Sparks of Hope in 2022, which is obviously a collaboration with Ubisoft.
Mm-hmm.
But, all in all, I think fairly decent showing from Nintendo. A lot of games, and a lot of games that I haven't really, mentioned at all. For instance, they showed a Just Dance.
Yeah.
Life is Strange. They've got Guardians of the Galaxy coming to the platform. Worms Rumble. Interestingly, they've also got a Fatal Frame.
Mm-hmm.
Last I remember of it is an old PlayStation horror game
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with a gameplay mechanic that used a camera.
Yeah.
Or as much as I remember it. So good showing from Nintendo.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Sony. So Sony was a complete no-show. So I don't even know why I'm talking about Sony in this kind of E3 topic, right? They're doing their own thing again. Post E3, they basically did a fairly lengthy state of play stream.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what did we get? We got Hunter's Arena, Legends, coming on PS4 and PS5. They've described as some sort of RPG mobile. They've got New Tribes of Midgard, which is an action role-playing game, coming in late July, which is 4-player co-op, which I kind of think looked a little interesting. I'm not sure it's my cup of tea,
Mm-hmm.
but it looks interesting enough. They had Fist Forged in Shadow, touching down in September. This I think is something that's been brewing for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it seems to have basically broken cover, and we're seeing kind of some gameplay footage of it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also had, and this was I think a good part of the actual state of play, Deathloop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think there was a 9-minute demo of the thing. It's coming in September, and really the whole premise of the game, and I'm really oversimplifying this, is you're tasked with assassinating 8 targets, and you're also being hunted yourself. And obviously the death loop,
Yeah.
die and it resets and you start the day over again, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And as it's an arcane game, we know it's going to be system based gameplay, so it's going to be, I think, reasonably deep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what I would say about the actual demo and the stream in general was, my god, it did look really jerky. And I don't know if it's the stream or something else. I thought to myself,
Mm-hmm.
I hope the game doesn't play like that, because this thing looks extremely jerky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And moving on from that, they also had this thing called Lost Judgment. It seems to be a spin off of the Yakuza series,
Mm-hmm.
where Yakuza is now going turn based, and Lost Judgment basically retains the real time action element of it. That's coming out September. We have a Death Stranding director's cut. I don't believe there's any date for that yet, but I think it's sometime this year.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like it's got lots of new content and also new content that affects the game mechanics.
Yeah.
And I've kind of recently read that Kojima doesn't like the way it's been branded or marketed, which he's saying that basically because a cut implies shortening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but obviously this isn't it, because there's lots of new gameplay mechanics, lots of new content, weapons and tools, I think is what I got from the trailer.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if he's right on the director's cut necessarily being a shorter one, because there's obviously movies of director's editions, or maybe they should call it director's edition or something. But
yeah, or the extended edition, whatever your definition is,
Yeah.
I think. But I'll tell you what it reminded me of. It reminded me of Metal Gear Solid 2
Mm-hmm.
Substance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there was I'd call it, a director's cut, an extended version of Metal Gear Solid 2, where you could even basically skateboard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have this kind of like skate park where the oil rig was. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Demon Slayer, it's based on some sort of manga and anime. There's a sequel to Moss, the VR game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that's going to be good. And they had this, talking of Fortnite, Arcadegeddon was announced. I think it's for 2022.
Mm-hmm.
That can't be right, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's coming out soon. And also, Sifu,
Mm-hmm.
which is this kung fu combat game. It's a beat 'em up really, in 3D actioner. And looks pretty stellar if I'm being honest. And they showed more Jet, which is one of the games they showed off, in one of the kind of PlayStation 5 reveals.
Yeah.
So to be honest, Sony weakest of the bunch.
Yep.
I mean, if I'm being honest, it wasn't a bad state of play. But if you take it in the context of E3 and what Microsoft and Nintendo have done, you kind of think, wow, gosh, why didn't we get more? I mean, they've got some pretty good games there. To be honest, doesn't feel like it's a lot, and so you kind of speculate that maybe they're kind of saving stuff up for a bigger reveal like they did before. PlayStation Experience or whatever they're going to do. But it just feels strange. I mean, Sony just seems to be doing their own thing. They're kind of saying, you guys are going to do, E3 will F you. We're not doing any of that. We're going to do our own thing.
Yeah. But then again, I don't know. I think all of them didn't really have that much of a showing, except for maybe Nintendo. If anything, the third parties, I think, won the most out of it.
Yeah, I didn't look much at the third parties.
So I would say Battlefield 2042. That was probably the biggest one.
Yeah, I did see the trailers for that and videos for that, and it's interesting. I mean, I think what interested me is these big time environment or weather events, like the sandstorms, like that tornado. I thought that's impressive.
Yeah.
But those sorts of things don't necessarily make a good game, right?
No, I mean, most of it, I don't think it was all cinematics. I think anyway from the 2042 trailer, which they showed off anyway, and I think it got people a bit interested in it again because Battlefield. And actually, to be honest, I'm not looking forward to 2042. I'm probably looking forward to a sequel to 2142, which was the sort of last kind of main futuristic one that they did. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah, and I guess the other big one for me was Diablo 2. They gave a date for when that was, so that was a kind of a key one for me. And I think they showed off quite a few things around it as well.
That was through Activision, was it?
Yeah, Activision Blizzard, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't really pay much attention to, I would say, the publishers, like the EAs and Activisions.
Yeah.
I really wasn't that interested. Because I think, half the time you kind of know what to expect. But yeah, I mean, definitely there's some big games coming out of those guys. But out of the big three, I mean, if I had to say who won it, I mean, for me it was probably Microsoft, followed by Nintendo. Sony was just last place because they didn't really turn up. They weren't really doing anything, and Microsoft just for the sheer weight of games, really, more than anything else. Nintendo did what they had to do, that's for sure. But the weird thing not announcing your OLED Switch, your next iteration of Switch, at that stream was just, for me, it was a mildly bizarre.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me on to my next question, really, and it's, does E3 even need to exist? If all you're doing is really churning out videos in streams, what's the point? If this is going to be the future.
Well, it needs a reason for you to be there, because I guess you need the, exclusive merch or exclusive things, additional. I guess it was demos and other things. I guess, and I guess Joe, you can talk about some of your experiences of actually attending, because I've never been to one, so I'd imagine there's a lot of other things kind of going on. But is that enough? I think is probably the question.
Well, E3 really is or was an industry event. So you're going there to do business. Is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But for press and fans and whatnot who can make their way there, what you'll get is early access to maybe some games. There's a big area with booths, and you can get hands on. Press will basically be able to kind of organise, let's say, interviews, hands on with the devs.
Yeah.
So that's where it's quite valuable from that perspective. The press events themselves, if you're a fan, are really, for me anyway, it was always going to be about excitement and spectacle. And I think obviously, if you're doing things via stream, you haven't got the audience there, you're going to lose all of that.
Yeah.
You're going to lose all of that. Now, it's not to say you need it. I'm not saying you need it. But I think video games does need some sort of event. A festival or something.
Mm.
I wouldn't quite call it the Oscars because, you've got the Game Awards for that sort
Yeah.
of thing,
I mean, the
right?
interesting thing is whether they would do. Did they try to sell virtual tickets for this one? Because if you wanted to
I
do
don't think so.
demo exclusive and stuff, you could probably do it via a virtual ticket or something.
Yeah, I don't think they did anything like that.
Hmm.
I think ESA, who basically run E3, they did have a presser site, and I've kind of heard it was just not really useful whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, that's basically the circumstance,
Yeah. Well,
that everybody's under, but...
Well, BlizzCon, they do have a virtual ticket, if I remember correctly. So they have a model that allows you do get exclusive stuff by having that virtual ticket, early access to certain things and that sort of stuff. So it's a possibility, but whether it needs to be in person, on site.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, obviously right now that can't happen, but I just think that having an event like this where it's, more like a festival, where people can make it there in person, where you do get a sense of excitement, I think it's valuable in a certain way.
But is that
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're holding on to nostalgia there, though. It's just because
There is an element of nostalgia, but it's the same thing. You could say I can listen to my favourite rock band through, audio through my phone, or I can go to a concert.
Yeah.
It's not quite an accurate analogy.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now with the new age of, well, COVID has kind of pushed everyone into a certain situation where traveling isn't happening. But you could argue the whole green agenda, climate change, should we be flying to places we can do remotely, all these sorts of things. That question is going to really push it very hard.
Yeah. I mean, you can't do that now, obviously. You really can't. It would be quite, I think, irresponsible to even attempt it. Because, the amount of people that kind of go through E3 and Gamescom and things like that, events like that, is just, I mean, it's massive amount of people.
Yeah.
But, I mean, going back to an analogy, I think it's closer to basically seeing a football game, a soccer game live. I mean, certainly you can watch football on TV and you have, it's perfectly perfectly good. But the reality is being at a game, you get the atmosphere, the excitement, the build up as well.
Yeah.
There's all that, it's the physicality of being, being there, you know what I mean? You'll miss out on. And maybe it's not having E3 as it was, but maybe kind of taking the good elements of that, giving the fans some sort of festival feel, having these big announcements, because maybe the industry needs it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then again, taking away some of the stuff that was, less efficient, like you said, some of these press interviews, some of these hands-on demos. With technology today, surely they can be done kind of remotely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't really need to do it. You don't need E3 for that.
Yeah.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
But definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and I think some of that will. It's a possibility for next year, but I think obviously anything this year probably just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. When things do normalise, I would like Sony to go back to these events. No matter what you say about the fanboyism of going to E3 and asking who won it. I mean, that statement in itself is like, silly statement. The reality is, it's pretty exciting. And you want these people to try and outdo themselves. That's the spectacle of it. Well, we'll see. I suspect that E3 will never be the same as it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just hoping it's going to be much more than it is now. That's for sure.
Yep.
And Al, with that said, I think it's time to move to the next topic.
Cool.
Okay, Al. I think the next topic we want to discuss is portable gaming devices. and the current state of the market.
Yep.
Now, I'm just going to give people a brief history of really what I personally know to be portable gaming. My own history of it is really, like we kind of mentioned before, Game & Watch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those old black and white LCD. They're really toys, really, if I'm being honest. But gaming devices that, you know, you basically have one game on it. You know, Donkey Kong or whatnot. Tommytronics, and I don't know if anybody remembers this. You know, similar sort of thing. Like having a pair of binoculars. It's almost like a VR headset without the VR. If you know what I mean. You have
Yeah.
one game on it, and again, you know, you carry it around with you like a pair of binoculars. If anybody's listening to this, they should kind of look it up. Tommytronics. I've also had my fair share of portable handhelds. I've had the Nintendo and Sony variants. I've had Game Boys. I've had the 3DS day one. I've had the PSP and PS Vita at launch. And I just find those devices just fascinating. Just basically what the kind of developers can squeeze out of them. Then obviously, in the not too distant past, we basically started to game more on mobile phones when they got a little bit more powerful. But you know, I don't know if that as a gaming platform has died a death. It isn't. It hasn't, because obviously people are still making money from it. But from my own perspective, I just don't want to play games on phones anymore. I mean, I went through a whole phase where I did it, but now I don't.
I've got an interesting thing on that one, actually, that I'll cover for mobile games.
The last game I really played properly on a mobile phone is really Infinity Blade,
Mm-hmm.
which was an epic game. You know, but I don't know how many of those type of triple A experiences you can get on mobile anymore. I know, you know, Diablo is coming out,
Yeah.
but beyond that, I'm not even sure. You know, I'm out of touch with that, if I'm being honest.
I think it's there. I think, but maybe we're jumping ahead if we don't want to cover some of the other history bits. But you know, I've obviously, you know, throughout the five, well, I guess this is podcast number 6, I guess. I'd be saying Genshin Impact all the way through, and
That's mobile,
and
isn't it?
that's mobile, but I play on the PC format. And more recently, I've been playing another kind of quite similar kind of what they call gacha game, which is basically the loot boxes and all that sort of stuff. But one called Punishing Grey Raven that my brothers kind of dragged me into, and that's
Punishing Grey Raven.
yeah, that's not even a piece. There's no PC release for it. So the way I play it is with an emulator on my PC, you know, which mimics the Android phone. You know, I can log on to my Google Play account and I'm able to play the game from it using mouse and keyboard, which makes it essentially like a AAA title, to be honest, on a PC.
Interesting. So, there might be a discussion to be had for pure mobile gaming.
I think so. If we want to talk about purely how that's going, how and why that format works, why are they making so much money? I think I can cover quite a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean that you know why that format works and why they're making so much money. Quite interesting because you know, I mean, I mean, for the types of games that I want to play and the way I want to play them, I don't actually think it works because I think for me controls are quite key. The touch and feel, the feel I should say rather than the touch, right, is quite crucial.
Yeah, and I think that's an important factor, right, Joe? And this is why I think even with, you know, the DS and all that sort of stuff, it was popular because of the touchscreen. But it had the right sort of games that actually utilized the touchscreen in the correct manner. You know, all those kind of Elite Beat Agents and all those sorts of things. Those games were quite unique to the DS, and actually made it really, really popular.
But even with the DS, you have a stylus, didn't you? You weren't playing it with your finger per se. It's quite interesting. I mean, I'm sure you know you always have the people who be quite divided about this thing because you know some people they want that tactile feedback, you know, when they got their hands on the control. But other people doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And again, the style of game, like you said. And again, that kind of leads us on to current day. Yeah, current day. No doubt about it. Nintendo are the kings of handheld portable gaming.
Yeah.
The Switch has done extremely well. It's sold 80 million units today. It's really, put Nintendo back on the map. They never left the map, but for a time they weren't doing so well.
Yeah.
We've also got a lot of handheld PCs. These are devices built upon, let's say, Intel and AMD chips with maybe mostly integrated graphics that run cool and, power efficiently in order that they can fit all that stuff into a mobile device.
Yeah.
But really, more than half of these devices are really Windows devices. They're literally handheld Windows machines, if I'm being honest. Obviously, we know that Sony and PlayStation have had a legacy here with PSP and PS Vita, and we know that kind of Vita's been kind of wound down now. And then when I mean shut down, I kind of really mean you can still get at the games, but you really can't. I don't think you can actually sell new games on it. You can re-download what you bought, what's there, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And other than mobile, I don't think there are any kind of other players. I don't think there are any other players. I'm sure there will be the odd portable gaming device you can get from AliExpress or something. But I'm not going to count those here.
Yeah.
But then recently, what we had was rumors circulating that Nintendo was going to produce a Switch Pro.
Yeah.
And as we know, the Switch itself, I think it's been out there for 5 years. But even when it was released 5 years ago, it was quite underpowered.
Yeah.
And to put it into context, right, the Switch is actually a quarter to a third of the power of a PS4 or Xbox One. If you're looking for a teraflop number, it's not even 1 teraflop.
Yeah.
It's like 500 gigaflops. Yeah. The GPU tech is NVIDIA, but it is Maxwell architecture. So really, that's the 900 series. Pascal, 10 series. Turing, 20 series. Ampere, 30 series. So it's massively behind.
Yeah.
Massively behind, even when it was released.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of people have rumoured of a slightly more powerful Switch. It just feels like even in that form factor, you could push that so much more. Yeah, that's why those rumours were always there around a Switch Pro.
Yeah, definitely. I feel it's coming, but I don't think it's not coming right now. It may be a year, maybe another 2 years. What I would say also is Nintendo hasn't really engaged in these sort of technology arms race since, I think, the N64.
Correct.
If you ask me, right, the N64 for its time on paper was a kind of really impressive machine.
If I remember correctly, the GameCube was actually the most powerful in that form in that generation of the. I think it was it against the PlayStation 2 and probably I can't remember which Xbox it was.
Xbox. So yeah, no, I think the Xbox had it. I
thought it was the GameCube. But it just didn't sell well in comparison.
No, I'm pretty sure it was the Xbox. Pretty sure of it. But I think it was comparable. No matter what you say, I think the PS2 was basically it was a fill rate machine. On that front, it had no peer, but it was definitely third place.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Nintendo these days don't engage in these sort of arms race.
Correct.
They just don't do it. And as you know, we've got these handheld PCs, which, if I'm being honest, really interesting devices, especially if you are a PC gamer. I personally cannot see anybody running Windows on those devices, especially if they've got no keyboard, because half those handheld devices don't have a keyboard.
Well, they'll be like mobile phones, where it needs a touchscreen interface, and it needs to be able to have a standard keyboard on top of it.
Yeah, correct. And some of them will have that, but not all of them will have that. And how it works on a 6 to 7 inch screen, I just don't know. I just don't know how that will work. We've had those devices either out in the world for a while, or at least basically being announced on, Kickstarting sites or whatever else.
Yeah.
But then out of the blue, and when I say out of the blue, we had heard rumours of a Steam PAL. Valve chuck out the Steam Deck.
Yeah.
Here you go, guys. This is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
The Steam Deck, which is I think, quite a big surprise to everybody concerned.
And I think we were chatting live at the same time as things were kind of going on. It was kind of interesting, and I was the Steam Deck it really tempted me because when you looked at the price and what it was capable of, it was pretty insane, and it still is really. But obviously there's no well, apart from IGN and a few others, who've had some hands-on with the kind of a pre-prototype model. We've still not seen the final version of whatever that thing is, but the pre-orders are there now, I guess.
Yeah, but I think people are only going to get devices delivered, I think, the early part of 2022.
December, I heard they were aiming for. So holiday.
Was it December?
Yeah.
That is going to be interesting. Getting into that, the Steam Deck itself, it's going to be an open platform. On paper, it's PS4 power.
Yeah.
Yeah, PS4 power.
Roughly, I was going to say roughly 720p as a screen resolution.
Yeah, which is good enough for a small screen. I mean, I think it's ludicrous to try and aim for 1080p. Something that small, you don't really need it, in my view. Or you're going to get not a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah.
But it's actually Linux-based. Not Windows-based. This it's a Linux-based machine.
Yeah.
You can obviously put Windows on it. But it uses Linux, it's Steam OS 3-based.
Yeah.
And it uses the Arch distro, which is a very stable distro for, I think it's largely used by developers, if I understand it. It uses Proton for Windows game compatibility.
Yeah.
Which, as I understand it, it's some sort of compatibility layer that can do translation from DirectX to Vulkan APIs, that sort of thing. You should get the same experience as running the game natively.
Yeah.
And, again, Proton was developed by Steam in conjunction with another group, I believe. And it's based on Wine, which is well known in kind of the Linux circles.
Yeah.
One interesting bit of information I kind of read is that, or heard, is that Steam want to make sure every Steam game works with a Steam Deck by the time it's released. Which, if you ask me, sounds like quite a massive undertaking. Yeah. Massive, yeah. But, they're the guys that would know, right?
Yeah. And it was interesting watching Gabe Newell kind of go through and, try and push it as a future form factor, right? As they want other kind of manufacturers to go and use it as a thing, as an offering.
Yeah, and this goes into the point of why they are doing it. And we'll get into that, but I agree, that's definitely an interesting, thing. Definitely an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But what I would say about this Steam Deck piece of hardware is like it's significantly cheaper than any of these other handheld PCs. It really is. I mean, I kind of did a side-by-side comparison. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you can install other OSs and storefronts on it if you want.
And that's the compelling thing about it. And you could use it as a, because I was thinking about why would I use it, right? I've not purchased a Switch because I don't travel that much that requires me to play whilst I'm traveling. So the same kind of really applies to essentially the Steam Deck for me. But you could also, as soon as the dock, well, actually, in fact, they were saying that you don't actually necessarily need a Steam dock essentially to mount it and play it on a large screen TV. You can basically use a standard USB-C dock, and it could with the right sort of HDMI connectors and DVI connectors. Then you could do it that way, and you could use it as essentially a portable PC and literally just put it right next to your TV.
Yeah, correct. Correct. I mean, for just being a purely gaming piece of hardware, you have to say that the Steam Deck would have a software advantage. I just still don't believe that Windows is, certainly not Windows 10, is really geared up to be the OS for a small screen with those types of controls. Even if it's touch. Windows 10, it's not the piece of software for that. Yeah, definitely not. But I mean, to get some context on this and how Steam Deck compares with the other handheld PCs, I told you I did this side-from-side comparison. There were some, well-known players in this kind of like space. You've got the GPD Win Max 20 521.
Mm-hmm.
8 inches, 1280 by 800 display. You have a choice of using an i7 or Ryzen 7, and these CPU parts, they're really CPU parts designed for ultrabooks, and they've got integrated graphics. So Intel have got Z,
Yeah.
AMD have got the Radeon Vega 8
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's comparable to a PS4 as well. So 1.6 T-flops versus the PS4's 1.8, and I think for the AMD it's 1.12. But again, it's it's Xbox One. 16 gigabytes of memory, 1 TB PCI NVMe SSD, and also good selection of connectors. Good selection of connectors. But what's the asking price? The asking price is, well, it kind of starts at $1,000 and goes up to kind of 1,700 from what I can see here.
And with that sort of money, you could buy the gaming laptop I bought.
Correct. Well, when you do that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
The other new player on the market that I've been hearing about is this Neo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Much the same sort of spec. 7-inch screen, 1280 by 800. Yeah, this is and they're mostly all touchscreens anyway.
Yeah.
This uses a Ryzen 5 4500U, which is a ultrabook part. Vega 6 graphics, 0.85 T-flops. So obviously some way below PS4.
Yeah.
Yeah, even below a kind of an Xbox One. 16 gigabytes of memory. Choice of 512 gigabyte or 1 TB SSD. Good selection of connectors. This thing is about $900 for the 512 gigabyte version.
Yeah.
And over $1,000 for the 1 TB.
Yeah.
And if I'm being honest, all of these handheld PCs on the market, announced or in the process of going to market, are in the region of $1,000.
Yeah.
Whereas the Steam Deck is and there are 3 SKUs. First SKU is 64 gigabytes of storage, so comparable to the Switch, $399. Then we have 256 gigabytes of storage. That's weighing in at $529. And then with 512 gigabytes of storage, that's about $649.
Yeah.
So significantly cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about the Steam Deck, GPU wise, it's about 1.6 T-flops.
Yeah, it was either 1.6 or 1.8. It was right. It was pretty close to the PlayStation 4.
Yeah. I think it's 1.6 looking at these numbers, but almost half the price of these other offerings.
Yeah, and you can see when, again, there's been quite a few interviews with Gabe Newell on it. When asked about the price, he said it was fundamentally important to kind of offer it at that price. He was grimacing around it because maybe, quite similarly, he maybe taking a loss on it. Similar to whether it's PlayStation or Xbox.
I think he's definitely taking a loss on it. I mean, Nintendo itself, if you compare it to Nintendo, I think it's about $350 now. 7-inch display, so it's comparable. 1280 by 720, so resolution's comparable. It's an OLED display, so that's an advantage for the Switch.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual technology under the hood, I mean, you're talking about a chip that's kind of ancient, a system on a chip that's ancient. Like I said, it doesn't even have a T-flop rating because it doesn't do T-flops. And it uses an ARM processor, which is no bad thing in itself. But the ARM processor on the standard Tegra X1 is an 8-core part.
Yeah.
Nintendo only use 4 cores, and one of those cores reserved for the OS. It's reserved for the OS. All in all, in comparison, older architecture, underpowered GPU, but it's still selling for $350 versus Steam Deck's
Yeah.
$399 price point for a significantly more powerful product. Significantly more powerful product with similar storage.
Yeah, and I think the thing will be also is not forgetting that just right off the bat, because it's more Windows or arguably SteamOS, Steam based, your Steam library is instantly on it, assuming it can actually run on it. But it just assumes that you can just move your library straight onto it. You download it, and you can play it from your portable format.
Yeah, and I think that kind of links into who is this actual product for?
Mm.
Is it for the users looking for a Switch alternative? That's kind of a maybe, because Switch users want to play Nintendo games, which are only on Switch.
Yeah.
Is it for users looking for a PC for gaming, for home and on the move? Really kind of applying that Nintendo formula to PC, so they can take, like you said, Al, take Steam with them wherever they go.
And I think it's one of those really interesting things where, because it's so competitively priced, and we talk about the PC master race and stuff like that. Not everyone's got a gaming PC.
No.
And because it's expensive to have one.
Correct.
Then actually this is actually, you see, it's quite interesting. When you look at what you get, it can actually be better than an entry-level gaming PC.
Correct.
And it's so powerful in such a small form factor.
And this is the other thing. Obviously, historically, PCs have multiple form factors, so that basically affects the cases, the components like motherboards. Obviously, not core things like the CPU or even necessarily GPUs. Yeah. So really, is the reason that Valve are doing this is so they can introduce a new PC form factor lower than an ITX, and we've been, people have talked about this whole ITX form factor for a while. That maybe it goes, there's something that goes beyond that, yeah. And actually, for a time, I thought the actual Xbox Series X would basically bring in a new kind of small form factor beyond ITX. But now that Valve have done this, and the fact that you can dock the thing, yeah.
Yep.
Is this what they're doing it for? Because we know you can license it, yeah?
Yeah.
And let's be honest, Valve aren't primarily a hardware company. They've obviously done the headsets, the VR headsets. They've done Steam boxes, which didn't do too well. They've done the Steam controller, which I'm sure we'll find facets of that controller in this Steam Deck.
Well, I think it will pair very well with the Steam Deck.
Yeah. Correct, so if you have one, definitely. I just kind of think, is this the whole point of this? And it, could be.
Well, it's probably to get a whole market of people that may not have even used the Steam store, get them onto that, get them to build a library, get them onto their service essentially. If you think about where they would be spending their money, maybe on Steam sales and Steam store.
Yeah, correct. You got to be a bit you can call it realistic or cynical, whatever it may be, and you got to say that, well, Valve have probably done this to have another means of offering up their content on something.
Yeah.
But it's quite compelling. I mean they could be ushering in the era of smaller PC form factors. I mean, that could be the whole thing here. It'd be interesting to see how that develops.
I'm just wondering if anyone else is going to be able to offer it at the same price point, though. That's the main thing that I think will struggle for other producers of the hardware.
Yeah, I think that's right, because thinking about it, at least Valve have got the advantage of, if they offer up this particular product at that price point, what you can say is that being a service provider, they're just increasing the footprint of the people who basically use Steam. So they have that advantage. But if a company like, let's say, Alienware or MSI decided to license it and do it themselves, what's the rationale for offering this cut price product?
There isn't one. There just can't be. So, unless they can get a cut of whatever the service is, which I can't imagine Steam offering it the other way around.
I don't see that happening at all. But then, do they need to offer it at that price point?
No, probably not. Because you could think about it. It depends on what variants they would actually produce off the back of the form factor. Are they going to produce more powerful ones? Maybe. Can it handle it based on the heat that it's going to produce? Not sure.
Maybe the actual portal device itself can't, but if they kind of smart with the dock,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that can. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we're in an era where we have external GPUs, we have all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
things. It might
Yeah.
play into that. Again, give a PC gamer a means of having a Switch-like experience where they can take it on the move or dock it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That for me is just kind of extremely interesting.
Yeah. And and I think it's a shame that PlayStation haven't released a Vita, right? An updated one. Literally a PlayStation on the go would have been great. PlayStation 4 on the go.
This is my point here. I think technically, I think they can, but the
Mm,
question is, right, is there a market for such a thing?
mm, mm.
Now, I think in terms of another PlayStation handheld, I still maintain they should basically go for a PS4 on the move.
Yeah.
And I don't really mean just specs for like with PS4. We've got backwards compatibility on PS5. Adopt something like that, have the whole PS4 back catalogue available to it, yeah,
Yeah.
and you solve the problem in terms of having software,
Mm,
yeah.
mm, mm.
You're also really extending your ecosystem,
Yeah.
and you don't
Yeah.
have to basically include the aged, Jaguar cores from PS4 that we know were basically kind of like anemic in terms of
Yeah.
power. You don't have to basically go back to the GCN graphics architecture, because we now know that even with Ordine 2 and Zen, we can run mostly 99.99999% of all PS4 games. So what's the
Yeah.
problem?
Yeah.
I mean, they'll have the same problem that the Steam Deck will have, in that no matter what you say, these games that are being developed for consoles on TVs and PCs with monitors, they basically expect a certain real estate on screen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's the design of the thing, yeah? So that's a challenge, and I think that's where Steam Deck's approach is obviously very vastly different to Nintendo's, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Steam Deck wants the hardware to work around the software. So you're taking the software that's
Mm-hmm.
been built for a home PC, and you're basically trying to make the kind of hardware work around that almost. Whereas
Yeah.
Nintendo, they're all about basically having very specific software for the hardware they have. And they
Mm-hmm,
always get
mm-hmm.
a lot of that out of that hardware. I mean, they've got Doom Eternal running on that anemic hardware at the moment.
Yeah.
So, that's a difference. But I mean, yeah, I mean, PlayStation, in terms of technology, could absolutely do that. What I want to is another thing. And again, I kind of maintain, right, Sony will have to be quite, I think, multifaceted is the way I would put it. They got to think about, we've got this software catalog. Do we want to be investing money into producing software specifically, or do we leverage our legacy?
Mm-hmm.
We want to do VR. Not everybody's going to be able to afford
Mm.
PSVR 2, because I'm sure that's going to be, a higher
Yeah.
end VR solution. So can we use this cheap portable or cheaper portable as a means of giving people a cheap VR experience?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the angle I would go down or look at. As Nintendo again, Nintendo reads everybody else. They've got an IP advantage. They've got focused development on that portable platform. Portable platforms is an area they've got massive experience in. And their development, no matter what you say, I think is world class if you look at what they've developed in their past.
Mm-hmm.
And again, why do you buy a Nintendo platform? Because you want to play Nintendo IP. And Nintendo always somehow get a lot out of the platforms they have, underpowered or not, underpowered or not. That's the thing
Mm-hmm.
here. Sony and Steam Deck have almost got to define or create their own portable market, if you know what I mean. It's almost like that. It's almost, yeah, we've
Mm-hmm.
got the technology, but do you have a reason for people to drop the money on that technology?
Well, I was close. I was
Yeah,
close.
yeah, I know. I looked at the Steam Deck and I started salivating. And I thought, well, I want some of this. Well, obviously,
Yeah,
I didn't do it, but not yet anyway.
yeah.
That's the thing, right? Nintendo don't have another console. The
Hmm.
Switch is it. Sony have another console or two, if you include last generation. The PC is just PC. There's just all sorts of form factors. But it'd be interesting if we get other players in here. I mean, Xbox seems to be just about the streaming.
Yeah, but they'll take good advantage of this, I think, because I think Gabe Newell did say that Xbox Game Pass, Cloud, etc., is going to work on the Steam Deck. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's automatically available, really.
I think Gabe New has to say that
Hmm.
because ultimately the PC is an open platform.
Hmm.
I think obviously that Steam Deck won't stop you. The device won't stop you from doing that. But equally, I can't see Valve offering up Steam Deck with Windows. Yeah,
Not
you know what I mean. They're not
not
going to do that either.
not at that price anyway, because they're
Yeah,
going to have to
yeah,
offer what the
yeah,
license,
yeah,
Windows 10 license.
yeah. I mean, their Steam machines, or I call them Steam boxes before, but their Steam
Hmm.
machines, right? They were all Linux based.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
also
yeah.
says something. I don't necessarily think they want to be in the same bed as Microsoft per se.
Hmm.
They're happy to be in the same room as Microsoft, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but not necessarily in the same bed.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I think Gabe Newell had to say that because PC is an open platform, and I think they're not going to stop people from doing that. But I do also think, right, that ultimately they want people who have that device to buy software from Steam.
Yeah, that'll be the
Yeah,
main reason.
yeah, of course. But if someone else wants to license it and produce their own Steam Deck, whether that's going to be Microsoft, the likes of Alienware or MSI or Dell, someone of that ilk,
Yeah.
then that's up to them. They can do what they want.
Yeah, I just can't see it being cost effective.
The only player where it would be cost effective is Microsoft. They
Yeah.
could basically just take the hardware design, which I'm presuming would be fairly compatible with whatever else they're doing, and basically brand it as some sort of Game Pass,
Yeah, offer it
machine.
straight up as Xbox connected and that sort of stuff. Then
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think the Xbox Series X and S are using some sort of cut down Windows variant. I don't know if I'm
Mm-hmm.
right in saying that. There's kind of nothing to stop you doing that either. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting state of affairs.
Well, I mean, it's created its own market, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But is that market about licensing?
Mm.
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, obviously they're gonna sell their own device on their own terms as a Steam device. But that can't be the only way they're going to generate revenue, and I think the licensing comes into play. And it's the same thing they did with the Steam machines.
Yep.
It's no
Yep.
different.
Yep.
And I think, Al, with that all said, and us being quite exhausted from this talk of portable mobile, Steam Decks, OLED switches, and why we're not getting Switch 2, and why PlayStation isn't giving us a portable, and what the hell is Xbox doing,
Mm.
I think it's actually time to move on from the portable, conversation and discuss our next topic.
Yep. Cool. Cool.
Alright, Al, I think the subject I want to get into right now is remasters,
Mm.
reboots, remakes. Is it good for gaming?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had some thoughts around this subject, and I'm just
Yep.
going to go through them just to seed our conversation with some information
Yep. Yep.
or some points of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Around the subject of remasters, reboots, and remakes, I just thought to myself, is it nostalgic or lazy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With the popularity of retro, is it actually desirable?
Mm-hmm.
Are the reasons for it the generation transition? Is it because the hardware has now a bit more continuity and therefore it's easier to port over?
Mm-hmm.
Investment in games is so expensive, so by doing this, are studios de-risking themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And if PlayStation or Sony buy Bluepoint, will we expect more remasters or remakes on the Sony platforms?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the last thing to consider is, and this is more of a positive spin on it, at the moment lots of games are locked away on legacy consoles like a PS3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So by obviously offering a remake, remaster, or reboot, whatever it may be, on a new platform, we're able to, share that experience with a wider community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the points I had in my mind around this subject. I don't know about you, Al, but I just see more and more remakes, more and more reboots, remakes,
Mm.
remasters, you know, extended versions, director's cut, the PS5 version of a PS4 game, so
Yeah.
we hear more about this type of, let's say, game
Mm.
than we do new IP.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's not the only industry that's doing it, right? There's lots of the movie industry have been doing remakes, reboots of stories for years, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
with not always the best results either. So, so
Or, remakes of, let's say, non-English speaking movies that they kind of like
mm,
delivered to the kind of Western world, or the English speaking world, I should say.
yeah, the Western version of it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's not always good either, right? Even the whether it was The Ring or Old Boy or all the other classics, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh boy, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was
mm,
another one. There's so many of them, really, if you want to be honest. And
yeah,
there's
yeah.
quite a few you don't even know about. You know what I mean? Like that people don't talk upon, right now.
Yeah, but sometimes a good story, and if you've got technology to as you kind of covered, to bring these more to life, and if it doesn't actually cost you too much, then great. If it costs you a lot of effort and time, then maybe it's not worth it as well. Because I guess the way gaming has kind of shifted away, from more, how should I say, monetization techniques that your traditional AAA titles have kind of had less appeal, especially to the big kind of corporate companies that will look for a good amount of profit kind of return from it. So it's a difficult justification in some cases. But I do like seeing some of the I think I've said on the previous podcast, looking forward to Mass Effect and actually Command and Conquer remaster. I'm just waiting for that to be the right price, and then I'll grab that as well.
Yeah, and I guess we have Diablo 2 coming out
Mm,
as well. I mean, but for sure. I mean,
mm,
that, for us personally, I guess that's more of the nostalgia play. I
mm,
mean,
mm.
back in the day, obviously, we really enjoyed these games. We have fond memories about the kinds of experiences and emotion that it provoked.
Yep.
And to a degree, we kind of want to relive that.
Mm-hmm.
So from our perspective, good thing. From the publishers and maybe the developers' perspective, it's another way to kind of draw more out of the kind of IP.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how I look at it.
yeah. I think the interesting one out of them, right? If you look at the market that they were going for, Command and Conquer Remaster still isn't that great in terms of an RTS. In terms of the newer, more modern ones, it is holding on to the purse strings of nostalgia of people that have played it before, want to play that again, and have that nostalgic moment of Tesla towers and all those sorts of things, and and those angles. But I think a story like Mass Effect, because it was so long ago, bringing it to a new age of gamers, essentially, it just brings forward that IP again, and hopefully gives, I guess, more hype back to the next Mass Effect, which I think they're going back to the original, at least part of the story chain, not necessarily the same Commander Shepard and that sort of stuff, but off the same lineage and continuing beyond that, rather than continuing on from the mess that was Andromeda.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think kind of remakes, remasters, or reboots are necessarily evil. You know, in many circumstances, that's what the gamer wants. They actually want the content, and if we want it, then publishers and developers will make it and they'll sell it to us, and we'll lap it up. There's no doubt about
Yep.
that. But I just sometimes wonder, is it stopping the IP from being created? Or am I being just a bit too kind of negative about that? I just want, no matter you say, games are kind of time-consuming, expensive things to make.
It kind of depends if you have. I guess the ways games are being developed now, you've got multiple studios, not necessarily the same studio doing the same franchise and the same IP. Even if you looked at Call of Duty, there was kind of two branches. Whether
Yeah,
that was the Modern Warfare branch,
Two teams,
yeah, exactly, and they were kind of in cycle year on year, so that they have 2 years to essentially produce the next game of their release and cycle, which allowed them to. You could feel it. You could feel the games were different based on the two studios. But I think also that was the same problem that happened with Warcraft 3. So Warcraft 3, I think they had a separate studio that actually looked after kind of producing that particular remake, and unfortunately that fell the wayside, and didn't really produce what they were kind of looking for. And there's quite a few articles coming out now of various crunch and various kind of issues with Warcraft 3 itself and why it ended up the way it did, which is really unfortunate because it was such a fundamental and key game that spawned a lot of IPs, from the back of its kind of custom map making as well.
Yeah, I mean that's the other way it could go, right? Whereas you go into it thinking it's a less of a risky position because it's a tried and trusted IP, and you could also say it's probably potentially less expensive to develop because some of these remakes will basically build on top of the existing kind of game code and game logic. They'll just give it a
Yeah.
new shiny kind of set of clothes.
Yeah, you should be able to reuse some of the assets, right? Whether that's
Yeah,
some of the models, some of the voice, the sounds, all that sort of stuff. Unless you did what what Warcraft 3 did, was also state that they were going to have new cutscenes, new voice lines, and everything, which actually I
yeah,
think worked in their detriment. Promising those things.
yeah. But I mean, something like Demon Souls, PS5 uses the original AI, is what I understand. But if this sort of stuff again isn't really kind of handled well, you kind of really souring the IP. It's a bit of a danger.
Yeah, especially with I think Warcraft 3 was the first Blizzard game. You could argue it was post Activision Blizzard and taking over and all that sort of stuff. And some of that you could argue is to blame, maybe. But it does tarnish that that original Blizzard kind of mentality of it will be ready when it's ready, and they'll release a good game when it is ready. And unfortunately, Warcraft 3 just wasn't. And actually, it's 18 months down since it was originally released. It was released back in Feb 2020, and a lot of the fixes that they promised still haven't turned up. It doesn't feel like it's going to improve anytime soon either.
Wow. I mean, it was actually pre kind of Activision. I think Activision took a bit more interest in well, maybe they were taking an interest all along, but I mean, certainly when World of Warcraft dropped, I think Activision basically dropped their money. But the whole Warcraft 3 thing is, like I said, this example obviously leaves a kind of bad taste in a
Yeah.
lot of gamers'
Yeah.
mouths, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's kind of irresponsible, isn't it? It's kind of you've got this cherished kind of bit of IP. You should be looking after it. How in the world do they let this happen? For me, that's staggering. I mean, like certainly from that perspective, one of the negatives you could take from remakes is like, look, you've got to handle the IP correctly. This is a cherished kind of piece of IP, and get ready for a backlash if you don't.
Yeah,
Get ready
because
for a backlash.
there's going to be diehard fans around it, right? Which want that same experience, want to have that same experience again, and if not better. And unfortunately, it was just lacking. And yeah, like you say, it just leaves that sour taste, that kind of mistrust. I think going forwards as to will they want to trust Blizzard, Activision again? The ones that may have pre-ordered, will they pre-order again? Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And it just makes it so much more difficult because that trust has been essentially broken from one of these particular examples.
And it's far harder to get back when it is a cherished IP. That's the thing. Far harder, I'm sure. I mean, that's certainly one of the negatives. But I just do hope Blizzard and Activision decide to try at least try and turn this around. As an act of goodwill to the fan base. Because the reality is they could have done a lot with that.
Yeah, but I think they're doing. I mean, Diablo 2 has been a lot more open, right? And I've already seen stuff like I think they're already in alpha tests, and there's already a list of They're very transparent about this one. The lists of improvements that they're doing, quality of life type stuff, and I'm honestly, it's one of those that I've not pre-ordered a game in I don't know how long, but this is probably one that I probably would, even off the back of Warcraft 3.
Yeah, well, the whole pre-order thing makes me laugh sometimes because if you're getting it on a digital download, then what's the point?
Well, it's the what is it? They normally give you added benefits, right? Extra skins, extra this. So
you'll forget you'll even have those skins after about 24 hours.
That's true.
I guess the other point I would make also is that we've often talked on the podcast about the continuity of consoles becoming more and more like a PC, where you can carry old software across.
Yeah.
For me, that also means that they're kind of closer together from one generation to generation. A little bit more similar. So that for me means games are easier to port across.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's put my cynical hat back on. I mean, you could effectively bump up the resolution, get better quality textures, apply some 3D audio. You could obviously increase the resolution, the frame rate, and maybe kind of tack on the DLC that you basically had, put out for the game.
Yeah.
And you could call that the Definite Edition, and you could sell that for maybe close to a full price game. Would anybody be the wiser? Yeah, that's an easier port.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of see that as a little bit of a danger when people are doing that. Is that on the one hand, I can see that during a generational switch, you want to give people a chance to play some of these games on their brand spanking new shiny machine, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's kind of like feels a bit lazy. I need to be careful about when I say lazy, because coming from a technical background like yourself and done the whole development thing, and even if you were going to do some of these, even if you weren't going to create a new IP, you were going to enhance what you had, the engine or the game that you had. Well, that's a ton of work still. That's still a ton of work, right? So when I say lazy, it's just kind of, it's not entirely accurate.
Yeah, well, I think we're less exposed to, how should I say, particular engines and particular industry formats. I think some of the stuff that we probably do is I guess more native technologies in some way. It probably depends on how vendor exposed you are as well in some cases. But
you can imagine if the artist basically who created a set of textures and whatnot, if they didn't render those textures in a high enough res at the time, do you redo them all? That takes time. And should you just shove it through DLSS or?
Well, shove it through
I'm not going to listen to any of that marketing. But it's a fault, isn't it? It's a fault. It's so when I say the word lazy, I'm trying not to kind of overuse it or use it wrongly. It's just that there's still effort involved here. It's just that it's lazier than if you could have produced totally new IP. Yeah.
But I think that's a problem with, how should I say, creative IP and good creative IP, because there's also dangers of it's the other problem is like sequels, right? Sequels which are not as good as the one before. It's just you tarnish the IP from that. Take Andromeda as an example. So
that's a very interesting perspective. I mean,
so if you've got
but could you? Because there are some. I mean, back in the day, and I'm sure even now, there are some sequels that are so close to the original game. In actual fact, is that a remaster or a reboot? I'm trying to think if there was a game that I played in the not too distant past, But if you know what I mean.
Yeah. But that was the sort of yearly iterations from whether it was FIFA or the other ones. So, I mean, EA have been doing that for years. for all their
very
sports
true.
categories, right? So
That's very, very true.
but yeah, and I think that's why it's important as a consumer of those products. We keep them honest as well. Don't just, I mean, yeah, if you enjoy it, and if that's the only game you're going to play all year, then fine, you buy the iteration or something. But you'd want them to, you'd want to keep them honest. You want them to improve the product, the features, and those sorts of things to give you something else, right? If they give you the same thing, what's the point? and some of that feels even like you could argue Destiny 1 and 2. It felt like it was the same old stuff.
Yeah. And I actually prefer Destiny 1. If I'm being honest. I mean, not the downgrade that we got for the second one.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point. We talk about remakes, but really, the yearly iterations of some of these franchises that we're used to. What are those exactly?
Yeah.
What are those exactly?
Yeah. And it's interesting because, and Ubisoft are already starting to do that, right? They're moving towards that, literally almost all their IP being live service type things, which means you're just playing a thing. Will there ever be iterations of it in the future? Maybe not. Maybe you could call it a version release or something. But maybe the engine stays the same. I don't know. We're coming into that new age of lots of kind of live service kind of games. Whether it's vying for our time availability, right? Which game can you actually spend your time on?
To a degree, Al, that would make, let's say, the sequel, or the remake, or the reboot, or the remaster a bit redundant. Certainly, if you were going from platform to platform, or generation to generation, certainly, that style of, remake might no longer exist because you just take the service onto the new platform with the bells and whistles that you can add to it, but it's still the service. So you could argue that really that's also an interesting perspective. I mean, and some points coming out here that I didn't really expect to be coming out, if I'm being honest. But now we start talking about it. You think, well, okay, philosophically, does this mean that, or does this mean this? I mean, on the positive side of things, some of the platform owners are, let's say, they're producing the Xbox Series X enhanced version or the PS5 enhanced version, typically free of charge. Yeah, it's just a patch.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's definitely the good side, and I'd say that's more like a remaster. It's more like a remaster, and obviously we used to get charged for that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fact that's happening, that's definitely good for gaming.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely good for gaming. But of late, what I'm seeing from Sony in particular is the director's cut. We've had
yeah. Was it Spider-Man?
Spider-Man was more of the Ultimate Edition with Miles Morales in.
You're thinking Death Stranding, maybe.
Death Stranding,
Yeah.
director's cut. And to be fair to that has a lot of, new content, not just kind of graphical updates. Ghost of Tsushima, they've got a director's cut coming out for that. But again, interestingly, that has a new island, which is apparently 20 hours of extra gameplay in that.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, if you take those just two, and then you think to yourself, "Geez, is that a sign of things to come?" You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I really kind of appreciate that they've gone back to these games and tried to enhance them and whatnot, right? But I mean, is this the sign of things to come? Or is it just something they're going to have in place for just this generational shift?
I think it's a gap whilst you kind of move over to it as well. I think.
Yeah.
A lot of the new creative IP, I think, is slowly coming, and quite a few of them will probably be quite hidden until they're ready to release something that feels like a good idea and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you might say this is. I mean, listen, if Sony are being above board, then this is just something they're doing because of this transition.
Yeah.
Potentially give the new PS5 owners a bit of software that they can play on the machine that shows off the capabilities of the said machine, but gives them new content, not just about redoing what was there. That's good. But clearly in the back of their minds, they're also thinking, well, there's not a lot of new IP, and that's coming later because games are expensive and they take time to develop. So in the interim, we'll just kind of redo these games and we'll kind of sell them close to full price. So that's to be fair, that's also happening. But at least they're giving us more gameplay elements.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
gameplay. Like it's not just a remaster,
Yeah.
high resolution and whatnot.
It,
I think that's really interesting, to be honest.
yeah. I mean, in some games, I would like to see literally just a remaster. Upgrading some of the graphics, because some of the gameplay back on the old games was still really good. Yeah, I'd love to see a Command and Conquer Generals. I know Command and Conquer Generals 2 has gone very quiet and almost
No, I
disappeared.
think I think it's more or less dead. I think they canned the project, which is like shame, because I was kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But on the whole kind of remaster, remake, I feel that in order for it to come across, I think, let's say consumer centric, gamer friendly, it should be about unlocking some of those classics
Oh yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
older platforms and just freshening them up. I'm pretty sure some of the developers at the time, they wanted to do things they couldn't because they were, let's say, limited by the technology we had in back then.
Yeah,
That would be super stellar.
yeah,
Commit some time and resource to that. That would be a great way of doing it, rather
yeah,
than just kind of bumping up the resolution.
yeah.
That's where I take exception with some of this stuff. No one needs to bump up the resolution, just to, build it into the console. This back compat stuff, give us a little, a patch or something.
Yeah.
Something like, let's say, Metal Gear Solid, back on the PlayStation, remade for modern times, not rebooted.
That needs a remake though. Because the first one, the engine and the limitations of the PlayStation 1 forced it to be the way that it was. You look at the more modern Metal Gears. If it could be in that style, awesome.
Yeah, but what I mean by reboot as opposed to remake, Metal Gear Solid should still be about Metal Gear
Oh yeah, yeah,
and Snake. Snake should basically talk in the same way, fundamentally look in the same way. He shouldn't be a different character. You know what I mean?
Well, plus or minus falling out with voice actors and.
Yeah, plus or minus. But that can be usually addressed via a check. And like you said, the limitations of the old hardware lifted, and that would be amazing because still to this day, I think Metal Gear Solid has some of the best, let's say, set pieces and some of the best boss fights. It's a classic.
Yeah.
That could really benefit from the new hardware and the new technology. I mean, even to the degree, I don't know if you've kind of been following Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Even that is not a straightforward, remaster where they've bumped up the resolution.
Yeah.
They've actually adjusted the gameplay elements in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And gone back and basically resolved or improved some of the problems they had. So that's what we need.
And it's the same with we forgot about Final Fantasy VII, obviously with the remake there. I mean, they split that into chapters and stuff like that. But the first one was relatively well received for all the upgrades they did.
It looks amazing. I mean, if you remember what it actually looked like, wow. I mean, that's what you want to see. But the essence of the game, the look of the characters, you would recognise them.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? There's no doubt who those guys are.
Yeah, it's quite funny when you look back at really old, retro, nostalgic games and you go, did it really look like that? Did it? Because I think your mind almost changes it. It makes it look better in some way in your own mind as you kind of interpret the image. So
it's the emotions you felt at the time, and you kind of feel like a sense of wonder for certain games and satisfaction when you finished it. And that's what you actually carry on with you more than remembering kind of the fidelity of the thing and whatnot. I mean, that's where Sony, I think, could play on the nostalgia, where they could kind of deliver good remakes. Don't want to call them remasters because remasters to me just it's like a film remaster. Will bump up the resolution. They've got such a back catalogue. There are so many gems in there and gems that we've even forgotten about. Yeah. They could most definitely do that.
Yeah. Cool.
So I think we've talked about remasters, reboots, remakes, and I think, is it good for gaming? It's like everything else. In balance, of course it is. Taking too far one way, no. But I think we should keep in mind that obviously there's a lot of old beloved titles out there. We'd love a remake, or even for some games a reboot.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not so sure about The Last of Us, however, but we'll see how that develops. So is it good for gaming? In balance, yes. But, again, let's be fair, let's not take it too far. Let's just not do it for a quick buck. Let's try and give some of these beloved, pieces of IP the respect they deserve, for one thing. I mean, start with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, don't turn it into another Warcraft 3, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. I think that's a lesson to be learned by all the developers and publishers.
Indeed. Indeed. And with that said, let's move on to the next topic. So, Al, the next topic is going to be the Amiga, the Commodore Amiga. And I really wanted to pay some, homage to it, really. It's one of my favourite, computers. Great gaming machine back in the day. Yeah, great gaming machine. And I've just got a lot of fun memories of it from my secondary school to college, uni days. So it's this is why I'm putting it out there, because gone but not forgotten, that sort of thing. What's your experience with it?
Yeah, I kind of grew up with it as well. I think trying to think, I must have been from must feels like the age of 9, 10. Kind of growing up with it. My dad kind of brought one. Yeah, it's just been with me throughout kind of secondary school, and then I think that's by the time maybe it was first, second year, the PlayStation 1 and stuff like that then started to come out. But there's just that huge gap of, Amiga and kind of other things, whether it was the SNES and other things kind of in between. But my Amiga was I would always go back to it, regardless. I'd play my SNES game, but I would always go back to the Amiga.
Yeah, great machine. Brilliant machine. But I think what I'll do is, I just want to give maybe people who listen to this who don't have the context of, what the bloody hell is this Amiga thing? What is it? So I'm just going to give some information just to give them a sense of things. In my view, it's got a really rich history. There's a lot of fun facts around it. But, this will make it old. It's now 35 years ago that the Amiga A1000 was launched. 1985. Developed by Jay Miner and the Amiga team. And this is during the kind of Silicon Valley boom, where the likes of Apple and the rest of them were kind of like coming up, and we had IBM PCs, and Microsoft were just coming up as well. Obviously, the Amiga that I owned, the A500, launched in 1987, and the last Amiga I owned, the A1200, 1992. Now, what was special about the Amiga? Well, you might say it was the first, and it was definitely the first multimedia computer. Yeah, computers didn't do multimedia. That's what people forget. What do I mean by multimedia? What I mean by multimedia is that they did graphics, animation, and music. That's what I really mean.
Yeah.
It was a multitasking computer, preemptive. So basically, what I'm trying to say is years ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Years ahead of its time. And the hardware was really designed to be a game machine. I'm going to show how geeky I am. There's a way to multiplex the sprites, so you can easily develop a Space Invaders game on it, if people remember what that was. However, it was a little bit mismarketed at the time, and that's a lot to do with the way the games industry was at the time, because it was really just marketed as a general purpose computer. There's some notable things people would have seen or remember about it, in terms of the bouncing ball demo, Tutankhamun's death mask done on Deluxe Paint, which was basically Electronic Arts. Deluxe Paint was Electronic Arts, and Sculpt 3D, and the juggler, animation, which was juggling those balls. And by the way, that was ray traced. And other fun facts, Steve Jobs was said to have looked at the Amiga, but had kind of said it was too complicated. Too complicated. Obviously, that guy loves simplistic, elegant design. Microsoft actually wrote Amiga Basic for the computer that was bundled with the machine.
Yeah.
Jack Tramiel owned Atari at the time and used to basically be the CEO of Commodore. Wanted the Amiga tech for Atari, but Commodore came in, and obviously Jack subsequently created the Atari ST competitor at the time. And so you might say the Amiga almost never happened as we know it. It could have been the Atari Amiga. Calvin Harris's 207 debut album, I Created Disco, was made in his home studio using a 15-year-old Amiga 1200. A collection of old floppy disks belonging to Andy Warhol was discovered, containing paintings he created on Amiga art programs. And he originally demoed D-Paint in the Amiga reveal, and I think this was in CES.
Yeah.
And the classic 1990s sci-fi TV series Babylon 5 was made in part on Amigas. So lots of fun facts there. But I mean, let's get to the technology. I mean, the specs itself. What made the Amiga stand out? Well, for one thing, it could gen-lock, which means you could overlay external video, with graphics, which made it good for video editing, TV production, and the like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the hardware and the software in the early 1990s provided a very low-cost kind of editing suite for a few thousand US dollars versus tens of thousands. There was this piece of software called the Video Toaster. I think it was a software hardware solution that's well known. It found a market in 3D rendering. What I understood is it's because of the amount of memory it could address, which I actually didn't know till I kind of did a bit more digging. What was actually the secret ingredient to the Amiga was really the custom chips. These chips would kind of free the CPU. They could access the memory directly through, DMA. We talk about secret sauce all the time these days, right? But, the Amiga had secret sauce well before its time. Yeah? Secret sauce well before its time.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you compared it to the machines of the decade, and in that time period, I'll compare it to the IBM PC-80, released in 1984 for $6,000. $6,000. It ran a 286, 6 to 8 megahertz, 256 kilobytes of RAM, but was only able to display 16 colors from a palette of 64. Yeah. 640 by 350 resolution, probably above average for its time. The C64, which was Commodore's home computer before the Amiga came along, that ran at 8-bit 6510, 1 megahertz, 64 kilobytes of RAM, a maximum of 16 colors at 320 by 200, but a decent enough sound chip, yeah. And that retailed for $595.
Yeah.
The Amiga at the time, A1000, 1985, $1,300. Not cheap, but it had 16-bit processor at 7.14 megahertz, would display 2 to 64 colors on screen, up to 4,096 colors on the hand mold, hold and modify, a 4,096 color palette, had hardware sprites, hardware scrolling, audio with 4-voice stereo sound, which allowed for sound samples. So well before its time. 3 custom chips, Agnes, Denise and Paula, handling all of this. A Blitter, which was this block image transfer chip, which really meant it copied video memory from place to place, filled in polygons and did line drawing rapidly. And this is why the Amiga was such a good animation computer. It could basically leverage that piece of technology. The copper coprocessor, this video synchronization coprocessor, would actually allow it to have parts of the screen and display running at different resolutions. That's the flexibility.
Yeah.
So all in all, really, really ahead of its time. Really, really ahead of its time.
And it was the first really, I would say, mainstream retail affordable, I guess, PC. It was still expensive, but it was the more affordable kind of section. And I think that was your original kind of home PC that was really starting to kind of kick off from there. And it had those, it had the, I don't know if you remember it, Workbench
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I look back in it, and I used to play with it quite a lot, and I used to think, this is pretty cool, this is pretty interesting. Even doing things like text-to-speech. I was like, this is so ahead of its time. And it was actually so much fun. You could play for it with hours, not even playing games, and you could do those sorts of things, which are good fun.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, talking of fun, do you remember its version of blue screening? That error message, was it the Guru meditation? They put a kind of a fun bit of text in its version of blue screening because I don't think the Amiga had memory protection. The story was they ran out of time to put it in or something along those lines.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember with there's certain games you needed multiple floppy disks.
Yeah.
And I'd actually have two stacked on extra floppy disk extensions, so I don't have to keep switching disks.
Same here.
I'd have both of them in at the same time.
Little things like that.
So
fun things like that.
It was so good that you could just keep expanding it, buying extra things to kind of just make it a bit better. So yeah, it was such a great format, and such a kind of good product to have originally, and that you could build upon. I actually, probably was the kind of key thing that got me learning about computers and and how to build them.
Definitely. I mean, I think I also learnt C on it. Everybody had Amos, if you remember that thing. You just did it. You could just do a lot with it. It was a great hobbyist machine, if you like. You had kind of stuff like those sound tracker programs.
Yep.
They're like just audio trackers where you could just splice together kind of samples and create music with. Deluxe Paint was also kind of ahead of its time. I don't think Commodore actually understood what they had. I mean, that was the biggest problem. I mean, they had something that was so ahead of its time, and it was just it was a multimedia computer before there was actually the term multimedia.
Yeah.
That was the thing, and it was a fairly, for its time, strong gaming machine. Obviously, it got superseded by some of the consoles like the Mega Drive and the SNES, and certainly something like a PlayStation kind of blew it out of the park. But Commodore had basically, I would say, invested in its development, because what they actually seemed to do was disband or shrink the design and development team behind it. If things had gone differently, I think the computer PC market today, and maybe even the games market today, the landscape that we have will be maybe somewhat different. But they never really pushed home their advantage. They never really did that, which is a shame.
Yeah, and I think that's a story of mismanagement, politics and other things that kind of got in the way as well, which is a huge shame because it was such a success at least in Europe, but it was one of those that it was such a powerful platform to build upon that it was a shame that it kind of disappeared over time, kind of from the back.
I mean, Commodore were no small company for their day either. If such a company existed today, I mean, they'd probably be up there with the likes of Apple and Microsoft and whoever else. They were very big, but I think their forte was business machines. I'm not sure where the gaming market was at the time. I think, to be honest, the gaming market had been stung, with what happened with Atari and the like. So, potentially that would have been seen as a bit more of a risky move. It's almost like a really regretful missed opportunity because it was so ahead of its time. They just needed to keep pushing, and that would have meant more competition. I mean, it's fair to say that the PC, as we know it today, maybe would have still won out because by sheer weight of numbers, because of the people developing for it and pushing it forward. It wasn't just one company; it was many companies pushing it forward.
Yeah,
it's legion. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Some of their plans they had that they never basically brought to fruition for the time sounded super impressive. Super impressive. But it's actually still alive. Shockingly so. And there's a company, I think it's called Apollo. People are doing a lot with FPGAs, so they built themselves kind of a standalone Amiga, for all intents and purposes, using an FPGA, but they've increased the specs. So this is the Amiga you probably would have got maybe 3 to 4 years after the A1200. maybe 5 years after the A1200, had Commodore still been in business, or the Amiga, being owned by somebody who wanted to push it forward. I mean, this
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
has modern display modes. I mean, back then in the 16-bit era, we used to talk about the size of the color palette, right? But we don't do that anymore. We talk about the color gamut and whatnot. The nits.
Yeah.
They've even taken it upon themselves to further develop the 68,000 CPUs. So they've got this thing called a 68,080, which never existed, by the way. It's just them, right, taking this thing and extending it using this FPGA. I don't know, and it's meant to be, I don't know, there was a number, I think it was either 1,000 times more powerful than A500.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It runs at a very modest clock speed, and I kind of read somewhere that the end game might be for them to actually produce a real bit of physical silicon. Yeah. 'Cause I don't know if you know the situation with the Amiga, but when Commodore went under, all the IP and assets were kind of split apart. So you have multiple people who own this stuff, and
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
none of them can agree.
Yeah.
I think this thing is built on an open OS. I don't think it's Kickstart. It's not Amiga OS, but it's its own thing. I've actually running a copy of it at home. They've gone around that kind of whole the legal and intellectual property rights thing. It's all very interesting stuff. I mean, that people are still trying to keep this thing alive. Why they're doing it, no idea. Yeah, but they obviously love the machine. It's a
Yeah.
labor of love, no doubt about it.
Labor of love, and maybe it's to keep some of the older assets on, whether it was written in Amiga's Amiga OS, etc., to be more alive, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And hopefully they've already. I guess most of the ROMs nowadays are available. But whether they've got the originals and save those down. Because I think whether it was floppy or whichever format, those degrade over time. So hopefully they've got those.
There's a bit of software you can buy. I can't even remember the name of it now because I looked into it. It's for preservation, really. So you can get hold of all the ROMs and all of that kind of stuff. All of that's available. Let's see. Who knows? We might see a comeback of the machine at some point. It'd be a miracle, but who knows?
I mean, there was some classic games which are, I guess, trying to think if they might have been Amiga only in some cases, but I guess there was quite a few also that were ports as well. And I guess most people probably weren't really. It was a mix of things, right? With Amiga, you could use it for multiple purposes. And gaming, I guess, as we were younger, I'm sure we were probably gaming it more than actually working on it. But
yeah, definitely.
But I guess to the more other crowd, the consoles, the NES, the SNES, those things are starting to kick off, right? Mega Drive, Sega Master System, all those sorts of things were also in parallel, kind of coming out at the same time. So, I think when people look back, they'll probably more people would think more around those things. The NES and the SNES, the Mega Drives.
When the Amiga had the right developers behind it, it could do some amazing stuff. Comparable to the NESs and the Mega Drives, especially if you looked at the A1200, all that it could do. I mean, it wasn't what everybody wanted because it was less than everybody wanted, but it was still capable.
Yep.
There were a lot of classics that were on it, Speedball and some of the the Bitmap Brother games. Psygnosis started on it. Team 17, who is still going in some shape or form now. There were a lot of good-looking games. There's so many. I mean, we did that podcast.
Kind of favorite games one. Yeah, that was
there
good.
were so many, but it was definitely it was a great. There's some great shoot 'em ups on it. I would say it had stuff like It Came from the Desert, Defended the Crown. Those sort of classics. I mean, I played Flashback and Prince of Persia on it. Speedball 2, Speedball 1.
Supercars was one of my favorites.
Exactly. Lotus.
Yeah, and more RPG type ones, but Space Crusade and Hero Quest. I sunk so many hours into that.
Or Captive and stuff like that. I mean, Syndicate was on it.
Syndicate, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Populous was on it. God, there's so many. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he even managed kind of like Monkey Island, but that had about 12 to 14 discs. You know what I mean? So that was a
Yeah.
disrobing nightmare. You had Dragon's Lair on it.
Mm.
You know, that sort of thing. And there's so many games you can name on it. Apart from IK Plus,
Mm.
you know, it wasn't, I say, the best machine for beat 'em ups. And I'm being unfair here. It wasn't the best machine for Street Fighter 2 like beat 'em ups.
Mm.
But it actually had a few reasonable attempts. You know,
Mm.
reasonable attempts.
Well, and I guess that was the interesting thing, right? Because on the Amiga, there wasn't really. Trying to remember, I don't remember there being joypads. I remember having joysticks, which I don't think most of the most of the kids these days wouldn't recognize what it is.
Yeah, they're missing out because I know for sure, right? Playing a shoot 'em up on a joystick is a different kind of experience. Different kind of experience, in my view. That was the other thing. It's back to progression of the machine.
Mm.
You're so far ahead. You don't push the technology along.
Mm.
Again, single button joystick, where everybody else is going kind of 6 button. That's going to impact
Yeah.
how the game feels to play.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm. Mm.
and people weren't paying enough attention to that. I mean, one
Yeah.
one game, however, that it couldn't play was or couldn't do well was Doom, and many
Mm.
people say that was pretty much a death for the Amiga as a games machine at that point.
Yeah. But I think the Amiga, the sound chip, was much better than quite a few of the consoles, right? At the time, I think.
Quality of the sound, definitely.
Mm.
The quality of the sound. I mean, by the time the A1200 came out, it probably had fewer channels than it needed. It really
Mm.
should have been an 8-channel sound chip or something along those lines, or 16-channel, whatever they could do.
Mm.
But it never happened. The sound chip itself is a really good one. I mean, sound samples.
Mm.
It had the chip memory, which the sound chip could directly access, and all of that sort of thing. But I mean, why it was so bad at Doom is, one of its strengths with the planar graphics it had was also a weakness as far as kind of doing something like Doom.
Mm.
The PC had this thing called chunky pixel mode. Planar mode graphics, you had to do five or six times the amount of work versus what you could do with a chunky pixel. It kind of worked on bit planes or something.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
But that's the thing. Some of the designs they had coming really were addressing that, but we never got to see them. And this kind of this vampire FPGA does some of this as well.
Mm.
It's fascinating. If I had infinite time and money, I would actually get myself one to see what it'd be like. Yeah, it's such a classic machine, and I think people have basically forgotten that there were some very notable game studios that started life on the Amiga.
Mm.
Do you know Rockstar North actually was formerly
Mhm.
DMA, who did Menace and
Mhm.
Blood Money? They also obviously did Lemmings.
Mhm.
That's the
Mhm.
heritage, the legacy. Obviously, Psygnosis, who did kind of Shadow of the Beast.
Yeah.
Certainly to look at, one of my favourite Amiga games. They closed in 2020. They were part of Sony. So
Oh yeah, yeah,
Wipeout
yeah.
and the like.
Yeah. They did. What was the other games? They did Destruction Derby and stuff like that.
Yeah,
There's a lot of good games those guys came out with.
exactly. Electronic Arts, well, it gave us Deluxe Paint. Deluxe Paint, classic, right? Not quite a game,
Yeah.
but everybody knows Deluxe Paint.
Yeah.
It's a crying shame it disappeared, but I guess with the way that the Windows PC was developing and the lack of development Commodore and Amiga, it was a matter of time. I kind of recall having my A500. When did the A1200 come out? 1992. And the A500 came out
Mhm. Mhm.
1987. So that's 5 years. And also,
Mhm.
the A5000 what was that? Is that 1985? So I've got my maths wrong here. A1000 first Amiga 1985. A500 1987. 2 years
Mhm.
later.
Mhm.
The spec hadn't really changed. Same spec. Yeah.
Mhm.
A1200 1992. So you might say there was
Mhm.
a 7 year lag between when the underlying technology itself was refreshed. It's like us in a PC space waiting for a new GPU
Yeah.
and only getting it after 7 years.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
The
Mhm.
other thing to this is that the A1000 was delayed, and as much as I understood it, the chips themselves were ready to go, but they needed to find a buyer. So the technology itself was ready before 1984. That's quite a long wait. So what did Commodore do? Yeah, they gave us the A600. Complete waste of time. And they wasted their time basically creating some sort of a... Was it a C64 Plus or some nonsense like that? I can't even remember. They actually tried to repackage it for C64. Total nonsense. And, when it came to the end, A1200 I liked as a machine, but obviously we all say we wish it could have been better. But the CD32, that has truly got to go down in history as the ugliest games console I've ever set eyes on. That is such an ugly product. I mean, I just can't understand what they were thinking.
Well, that was their attempt at, pushing against the other consoles, right? That was their attempt.
But
right?
it was like almost kind of like 3 years too late for one thing, technology-wise. I mean, if they had developed a better, chipset on the A1200, that definitely would have made its. I mean, it was the same. It used the same technology as the A1200. It would have made its, way into that. So that was one thing, and the other thing was, my God, it was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. The Amigas have I think, a heritage of actually looking quite nice. Yeah, nicely designed and nice color palette on the hardware. But this thing was like a light. Well, I don't even call it a medium grey. Was neither black nor white. The controller. God knows what that controller was. It was an upside down controller. Bright idea was that it looked really cheap. It looked terribly cheap. Part of me, when I saw that, I thought to myself, "This is really the end."
Yeah.
Because you can release a product like that, that means it's the end.
Yeah, and they probably spent a lot probably trying to make it work, but they were clearly going to be falling behind versus the other gaming consoles that were out there.
Yeah.
Probably the Mega Drive and the SNES were so popular at that time, it almost felt it was probably almost impossible.
Yeah, and better better gaming machines. Obviously, they weren't multi-purpose machines, but the reality is that there was such a lag between the technology refresh that they should have been put out a refresh at worst, every 3 to 5 years in order to maintain that technology advantage. And had they been ahead at the time when all this was happening, and had they had someone at the helm who understood what the Amiga was, it's not a business machine. Let's be honest here. This thing's for creatives. And it's for games. Those are the two markets you have. It's a great kind of animation machine. It's a great rendering machine. The video toaster, video editing. It's great for audio. They kind of stuck some MIDI ports into it. God knows what would have happened. MIDI's not a thing now, but I mean back then it was a thing. And then, kept on iterating the graphics and sound hardware. And did something about a controller, because obviously they conned on right towards the end because they gave the CD32 a 6-button controller. As ugly as it was, right?
But that was way too late.
Way too late.
And by that point, I don't know how many joysticks I'd gone through, because I don't know if you had the same problem, but I went through a lot of joysticks.
I didn't, because I used to have this. Well, and I'd gone through a few. Don't get me wrong. I basically used the Competition Pro 5000, which had that metal shaft.
Okay.
And didn't have a lot of travel.
Yep. That's probably a worthwhile investment. If I did that at the beginning, that would have.
What did you have, a quick shot or something?
No, I just went through joysticks after joystick, because just playing so many games, it just gives over time, and suddenly the whole thing becomes loose.
Yeah.
And it just sort of disintegrates.
Competition Pro, mate. I mean, there's no telling what the Amiga would have been like if it basically had continued. I mean, I'm sure the computing space would have been a bit more interesting and a bit more lively. And it was so far ahead. I mean, if they could have kept pushing out the bolt, if they had made the right decisions, it'd be interesting to basically do kind of a podcast or a bit of content.
What if Amiga took over the world?
What if? What would it look like now? What would it mean for the competition? It is really one of the most regretful things I felt in the technology space, that this thing didn't do better than it could have.
Yeah,
because
but
everything was so far behind it.
We should do something like that, because there's been technologies over the years that have been better, could have, you know.
Yeah, it's funny you should
So
say that
we should
because
we
I've
should
been
we should
brewing some ideas for that.
mm,
It's
um,
science fiction, but I love science fiction.
yeah. I mean, the interesting thing would have been that it would have been, because it was PC and Mac, right? I mean, and it would have been one of those. It would be a third. It would be a third competitor, if anything, right? That's what it feels like.
Why not? Why not? I mean, the more competition, the better, and
Mm.
I miss the days of the 8 to 16-bit and maybe up to the 32-bit,
Mm.
era where you had such a multitude of machines to choose from. It was almost overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
You had machines like the Sharp, I think it was the X6800. You had FM Towns in Japan,
Mm.
the MSXs.
Mm.
I don't know if you ever caught eyes on the Elan Enterprise. I'm a bit of a 8-bit, 16-bit geek when it comes to machines because I used to covet all of these machines, right?
Mm.
The Dragon 32, the Auric, one in Auric Atmos. I'm just rolling it out now.
Oh. All this stuff that you're saying to me reminds me of games magazines and
Correct.
demo discs on the front.
Correct. The golden era of computing, eh? What I remember as a kid, right? I used to have this. I don't know where I got it from. I must have got it from W.H. Smith's or something. It was a small color, and good quality photos front to back. Basically, every page was a different computer, and it give you the kind of high level specs of the thing and maybe kind of a paragraph. And I remember as a kid reading that thing, and it was reasonably thick. I think there was at least 100 pages in it.
Nice, yeah.
But I remember reading it front to back over and over and over again because just reading about these specs. It's kind of like having your do you remember Trumps? Those cards. Yeah, but
Yeah,
in a
top
book,
trumps.
in a
Yeah,
book,
yeah,
yeah, top
yeah.
trumps, but in a book for computers. And there were so many
Yeah.
of them. Al, there were so many of them. I mean, these days it's kind of boring, because you have your Windows PC and you can have either AMD or Intel in it, or you could have the Nvidia AMD and maybe Intel in it, and that's kind of pretty much it. Or you can have a Corsair keyboard or some other keyboard, or in that way it's good. Like it's Lego for adults, but I miss the kind of the crazy amount of choice. And some of these computers were awful as well, but probably unusable as a computer. But
Yeah, and back in those days, I think you would. Well, the internet wasn't a thing, right? So
no, it wasn't a thing.
you don't have access to that level of information as we do
Yeah,
nowadays,
exactly.
right? So
Yeah, exactly. Magazines and books, they were everything. Yeah, and with our nostalgia and Amiga kind of itch scratched, I think. I think it really is time, after giving much love to the Amiga. I'm not going to say Commodore Amiga. I think we should just take the Commodore part out of it, just the Amiga. The visionaries were the people who created it, and the people who brought it down were the people who were trying to sell it. With our love given to that classic computer, I think it's time to move on to the next topic.
Cool.
Okay, Al. So, we've now got a new version of Windows incoming.
Yes.
Yes, it's that time of the decade again. And I'm not sure how I feel about it, if I'm being honest with you. I'm quite comfortable with Windows 10 for one thing. My own opinion of Windows 10, it feels like a step up, from what I've experienced in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm trying to do more with it, but I just kind of feel I've been able to do more with it than I have other kind of versions of Windows. Maybe just a sign of the times more than anything about Windows. But what I've seen about it, number one, it reminds me of an Apple UI. There's no doubt about that. And maybe that's the way they've tried to have it come across in some of the marketing material. But even the presentation and announcement for Windows 11, that really did come across as an Apple presentation. It was almost a little bit cringy, how much so. I'm not sure if I liked it very much. It was what it was.
Mm.
You know, it was what it was, and they seem to be obviously focused on productivity features like screen snap,
Yeah.
allowing you to resume where you left off. So if you
Mm.
either, I don't know, it was moving your computer around in terms of your laptop, and also maybe something to do with the account, the Microsoft account.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you basically come back to the same kind of screen layout and all that sort of thing. So that obviously that's a step up.
Yeah.
You obviously going to have this new UI, so we'll see how that pans out.
Mm.
It looks super simple.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of it because of that.
Mm. Mm.
It was too simple,
Yep. 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 Yep.
and it integrates with Game Pass, which
Mm-hmm.
is to me absolutely no surprise.
Yep.
It's obviously not just an app now. You can take the analogy with, I guess, what they're doing with PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation Store.
Mm.
Again, it might be just a visualization, layer. Who knows, right?
Mm. Mm.
But for the gamers, what they have is auto HDR,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is, I think is an Xbox feature, and obviously direct storage,
Yep. Yep.
as well as obviously Game Pass, which is clearly for gamers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Al, I don't know if you've been following this, but I mean, what do you think of the new version of Windows?
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff. Like I saw something around being able to install Android
Yeah.
kind of things as well. But interestingly, it was they must have done a deal with Amazon, strangely, because it was the Amazon App Store and not Play, the Google Play App Store, that was on there. So it had things like you could do things with Android, which are quite interesting. Direct storage was massively interesting as well. Thankfully, they've there was initially some controversy around it being Windows 11 only feature, but I think that's kind of opened up, which is quite nice. Back to kind of Windows 10, and I think the other thing that was of interest was there was some kind of security module. You might need a security card or something to make it work.
TPM 2.0 in Secure Boot.
Yeah, so that was the only other that was the sort of restrictive kind of angle. But otherwise, seemed okay. Yeah, like you say, the fancy UI doesn't really work for me. But no doubt they'll have features to kind of turn it back to like a. I do it with quite a lot of the OSs. I disable all the kind of fancy features, the transparency features, because it's just eating up RAM. I don't need it. I don't need it to be transparent.
True. I mean, even on because I'm very comfortable with Windows 10. I'm very productive on it, and even with that, I use this thing called Fences from I think it's Stardock, software. And really, in reality, all that really does, right, is makes your Windows 10 OS look like Windows 3.11. Because you have these kind of like set windows, and they're kind of transparent, but you have set windows where you can place icons. So I've got one for games, I've got one for creativity, I've got one for engineering, all of that sort of thing. So you can imagine what I'm going to do with Windows 11 when I upgrade to it. I'm going to make it look like Windows 3.11.
But that's what I do with all my whether it was Windows 7, 8, 10. I always kind of remove all those extra fancy features that you don't really need. Dumb it down a bit, because I want to do productivity. I want to do, the gaming side of things without having to. It's not a necessary feature. It is nice to look at, but I'm only going to look at it temporarily whilst I'm going through browsing windows or kind of moving from one to the other. And even then, I'm not looking at the edge. I'm looking at the content. So
it's true as well. I'm not going to upgrade straight away, I've got to be honest, because I'm actually loathed to basically have to set up my PC for a new OS. I mean, it might basically upgrade quite smoothly. I might be able to translate or transfer a lot of what I have and make it feel the same. I'm not a big fan, especially with OSs basically being an early adopter.
Yeah.
It's a hassle. I mean, you've got your daily driver machine. You want it just to function and work the way you want it to function and work. I'm not here to beta test anything for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and I think the only other thing that I noted was some better integration to Windows Hello was the other thing. It works with more features, more webcams, more things like that. So I think that's the additional benefit that you get from it.
Yeah. I think the security thing is quite interesting.
Mm.
TPM 2.0, what I understand about it, it's a way for you to securely hold an encryption key.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You know, and I think they use the same sort of technology for crypto.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You know, you can line a module to basically an account
mm-hmm.
and secure boot as well. If I understood that, it's about basically making sure things that boot up are signed properly.
Mm.
If an OS is starting up, right, you know, it's got to be signed,
Yep,
otherwise it doesn't happen. Something along those
yep.
lines, I believe. As security becomes more and more required and more needed,
Mm.
yeah, you can understand why Microsoft will do it.
It makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah, I totally understand that. The interesting thing is that whether there's enough, you can have. I think you can have TPMs on both, software versions as well as
Yeah,
hardware versions. But I suspect the ones that if you want it to be booting up instantly with it on, then you need a hardware version. But I think it would be interesting to see how that kind of evolves and whether that will even be available from vendors and stuff like that.
yeah, the software is the firmware, like the BIOS,
Mm.
and then yeah, there's TPM modules.
Mm.
None of this is new technology. It's been around for a
Mm.
while, and it's just
Mm.
that it's not being really enforced. I don't see Microsoft really blocking people who don't have a TPM or don't want to put secure boot on from
Yeah.
upgrading. If I'm being honest, I mean they're pushing it now, but I think they'll kind of backtrack.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't surprise me. And maybe what they can do is that it's probably for users that need more productivity type tasks or things like hooking into whether it's Google Cloud or the other things to give you that added security around it, right? I'm sure
Enterprise,
there'll
yeah,
be benefits around it,
yeah, yeah,
but not for your a standard user. Maybe less so, but I think you could sell them the idea that, oh well, actually by doing it this way, then your access to other things would be much more secure around it. Here's the benefits X, Y, and Z as to why.
I do
Um,
hope they kind of move the dial forward a little bit on the
mm,
security aspect of it. I mean, that's for sure. I think rather than really criticizing what Microsoft are doing, you should have maybe we should be applauding it.
oh, we should. I think because you could argue various security things can be breached over time with whether it's brute force or other kind of techniques. And as things become more and more powerful, these things become much easier and easier to crack. You need these kind of additional security layers in order to avoid some of these problems. And otherwise, you can only trust. What can you trust then out on the internet?
Yeah,
and you need these sorts of things to protect companies and individuals ultimately as you kind of use it, and more and more people that utilize it as well.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think it is important.
yeah, definitely, definitely. It seems like they basically backtracked on the whole storage thing as well for Windows
Mm.
10. And if you ask me, that was pretty stupid. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna take a bit of time for people to move off Windows 10.
Yeah,
It's gonna take a bit
yeah.
of time, and then direct storage is really one of the tenets of the new generation of games hardware.
Oh yeah. It's all the SSD
Yeah,
back to
back
the
to the
SSD
SSDs,
means.
right? Them locking it out,
Mm.
locking it into Windows 11 seemed, wow, really? You gotta really hold things back here. You gotta hold things back for your own
Mm.
platform, if you ask me. That was a silly thing about it. I thought, why would you do that?
Yeah,
You want more
yeah.
people supporting this. You want more people kind of designing around this.
Yeah. And if you want, as game engines take advantage of the faster SSDs, if Windows 10 and Windows 11 can't, if Windows 10 cannot cope with it, then that's suddenly a huge population of people that can't, and that just that's just crazy. So thankfully they made
Yeah,
the
and
right
if you
decision
think
around
about
that.
the synergy between Windows and Xbox, Game
Mm,
Pass,
mm,
I
mm,
think, why would you
mm.
want to do that? Because
Yep.
let's be honest, right? The one advantage a PlayStation 5 has over an Xbox and a gaming PC right now is the speed of that SSD and what they're doing with it.
Mm, yep.
So you would basically try to sabotage your own platform by giving your competitor more of an advantage. seems a bit ludicrous to me. I mean, I'm scratching my head. Why would you want to do that? They backtracked, so someone saw sense. Who cares? Good for
Yeah,
Microsoft. Good for the Xbox also. You
yeah,
don't want to be held back like that.
yeah, indeed.
But I mean, what I will say, I'm not going to upgrade to this anytime soon. At what point can I get a free upgrade?
Mm,
And I'll wait to that point and then I'll upgrade,
yeah,
but not before. I'm still quite happy with Windows 10.
yeah. Well, I think it was only off the back of leaks that we've seen so much information around it recently. And I guess Microsoft were then forced to kind of, explain themselves a bit. But, I think, is it due, towards the November, December kind of period this
I
year,
think
right?
so. I think so. But they're going to support Windows 10, I think, until I heard 2025.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that the free upgrades will basically expire before then, if I understand it correctly. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait. I mean, like I said, my Windows 10 is my daily driver as an OS.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't really, want to cause issues to that unless I really absolutely have to.
Mm.
I'm quite happy with it. I don't feel a pressing need to upgrade. I mean, how about you, Al? What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I'm not in any rush either. And maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll just do it like on my laptop or something, or one system I'll do it on, and then just play with it. And and if it doesn't meet what I expected to do, then I'll just reverse it back, right? So I'll just play with it for a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, that's sensible.
Yeah, but I also agree with you. Early adopters of these sorts of things usually quite painful. So
Yeah,
I'll
I don't
usually
want the
wait a
pain.
bit. Yeah.
I'm not really down for being tortured by Windows. That's not what I'm about.
Yeah.
And with that said, Al, I think it's time to end our conversation about
Mm.
Windows 11 and move on. Okay, Al, it's come to that time of the day, night, or otherwise,
Mm.
where we have to say our goodbyes.
Mhm.
But before we do that, obviously, same
Mm.
question I ask every podcast: what gaming or tech things are you doing at the moment?
Interestingly, I have a better update than I normally have because um, I've actually been playing a new game, and I purchased what was it? Total War Three Kingdoms a
Ooh,
while back, so I played a tiny bit of that. But what's been actually taking most of my attention is another mobile gacha game, so similar to Genshin Impact, but a game called Punishing Grey Raven.
that's such a funny name.
It's great. It's been out in China, Taiwan, and Japan for well over a year. It's only just had a global release. I'm going to say about a week or so ago, and it's mobile only. So it's one of those games. It's not on a PC client. So what I have to do is it's interesting. I have to I've got an Android emulator, and I have to basically log on to my Google account from there, etc., and play from an Android emulator on my PC, and it's great. And I also play it on my phone as well, but not as much. But yeah, it's great. It's good fun.
What kind of game is it?
Um, how would I best describe it? Hack and slash, more action, kind of RPG-ish to an extent. So there's leveling up your character, building weapons, building kind of equipment, but it's quite fast-paced as well. So you switch between the characters, dodging mechanics and other things. So hack and slash, dodging, mostly PvE. The only PvP-ish kind of element is more of a competitive ladder. So you're not fighting against people, but you're fighting for a score. So this is where it's quite interesting, where the PvE angle, there's a competitive edge of, I want to have the highest score, so I have the highest rank, so I get more rewards and that sort of
It's
stuff.
kind of leaderboard, really.
Which is great, because you don't really have that in Genshin Impact. So that gives you something to go after. So there's a skill element, although you could argue there's the pay to win element as well. You could pay more money to roll more weapons, roll more roll more characters, and that sort of stuff.
That old chestnut. I wondered when that was going to come up with these bloody mobile games.
Well, that's why they make so much money. Is that if the game loop is good enough, then you might be willing to spend more money. So the money that you spend, and it's interesting, and it's the same with Genshin Impact, is that you could basically use it to refill energy to play more, or you could use it to gamble essentially on loot boxes to get more characters, more weapons, more things. Yeah, and there is a very vicious cycle, which I'm sure we'll touch upon.
We'll talk about it quite sometime. It sounds quite some ominous kind of like thing here going on, you know.
But yeah, it's interesting because I think it's if you've got a good gameplay mechanic, and if you're sinking enough time and hours into it, is it worth your, rather than buying a beer, would you spend your £5, dollars, etc.
If you're that addicted to the game, you actually haven't got a choice. It's not actually the option. You're not going to suddenly think, well, should I stop my kind of like addictive tendencies here and go and get a beer? That ain't happening.
Yeah, so that's been keeping me busy on that side, and obviously playing with the Android emulator has been more the tech angle.
Yeah, that sounds actually quite interesting.
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy, and surprisingly interesting as well. You can do.
Is it a Microsoft emulator?
No, it's so I'm using BlueStacks 5, but I think it's open source. At least I've not had to pay for it, so and they've not been. I've seen a few adverts here and there, but I'm not too fussed about that. Yeah, it's pretty good. Just seems to work because I suspect they've been doing it for quite some time now. These emulators for Android.
Yeah. I just wondered if it was connected to that Windows 11 capability of being able to run.
But I suspect it's because it's now mature enough that they're doing it like that. It's similar with the Steam Deck, right? The Steam Deck is the other way around to an extent, allowing you to be able to go onto the Windows format, right? From the OS they're kind of deploying on. Yeah, so those are mine, really, Joe. What about you? What about yourself?
Yeah, well, this time around, I've been playing far less games.
Mm-hmm.
Far less games. Though I'm looking to start Ratchet and Clank with the port, and I've been, again, my time is always going to be my limitation. But what I have been doing technically is basically studying up for my cloud certifications. So, I've got my AWS cloud certification. So I kind of studied and took an exam for that. Just like, people listening to this, my God, that's boring. The fact that I've got to study and do an exam is pretty boring. But, the technology itself is actually quite interesting because, you can actually get satellite time through AWS. Shockingly. What you do with that satellite, I don't know. I doubt you could mount a killer laser weapon on it, but, you do something with it. And, right now, I'm also swatting up for my Google certification. So my plan is to get 2 AWS and 2, Google Cloud. And it's really a working career thing, because, as I've said in the past, you and I, Al, we're in the technology space. Not in the gaming technology space, but we're in technology. These are sorts of things we have to do.
Yeah. You got to keep up with it, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. But gaming-wise, not a lot. Not been doing too much. Dabbled in kind of Warframe recently, but I'm looking to start Ratchet actually. Quite soon. So, that's what it is for me. But keeping busy with technology, that's the key thing.
Cool.
And with that all said and done, it's really time for us to say our goodbyes again. And again, guys, please like and subscribe if you want to support our channel. We need any kind of help we can get. But anyway, look, we're still enjoying this, don't get me wrong. So, it's goodbye from me, Joe.
Yep, it's goodbye from me, Al.
And until next time, have a stellar day.